We can compare our maps
okay?
and help one another see reality
All right,
as it
now
really
we got
is.
the live video
And when
coming
we
in.
both see reality
right.
as it is, we can
Facebook
journey
looks
through it together
good.
as equals.
Sound looks good.
I guess you're right. I'll start packing my things.
Everything is looking great.
In a letter
this
to his
morning.
sister,
All right.
Nietzsche wrote, "If you wish to strive for peace of soul and pleasure, then believe. If you wish to be a
Workbook lesson
devotee of truth,
88, the
then
light
inquire." And in my opinion,
in
Zarathustra
you
tells
is
his followers
all
to leave
that
him
I
because they are still
see.
believers. He wants them to become inquirers. He
Lesson
doesn't want
88,
followers.
lesson
He doesn't
summaries
want people to believe what he
of
says.
75,
He wants them to doubt him,
76.
inquire, verify what he says for themselves, and see if they arrive at the same vision of reality. And if they arrive at the same vision of reality, then they can be
Adriana's
travelers in
next
this
to
world
me.
together.
You
They can
guys,
be equals.
Adriana's next to
But if they
me.
simply believe what he says, then they become followers.
Yay.
Followers learn to follow someone else's map,
All right.
and by
so
doing
what
so,
we got here?
they lose a direct connection to reality.
I'm
And
up
if
in
they
the
lose a
corner,
direct connection to reality, we all lose the
and
value
we can at
that
least see
comes
the
from their
lessons,
own
so
unique
that's good
perspective.
enough.
We lose the value of independent verification and the possibility of someone correcting us. But inquirers,
All right,
on the other
reading out
hand,
of A
make
Course
their
in
own
Miracles
maps
Workbook
and
for
maintain
Dummies.
their connection to reality.
Lesson 75
And because
is
of
the
this,
light
they bring us
has
actual
come.
value through their
Lesson
unique
76
perspective of
is,
the world.
I
But at the
am
end of the
under
day,
no
this is just my
laws
opinion
but
and understanding of
God's.
Nietzsche's words, not advice. Feel free to use this information however you like, and if you have a different take on Nietzsche's words, I'd love to hear your perspective in the comments. And if you're looking for a fun
Review
way
of
to
lesson
improve your
75,
understanding of the world,
the
I
light has
recommend
come.
checking out this week's sponsor,
In
Brilliant.
choosing
You may have heard me
salvation
mention
rather
Brilliant
than
before,
attack,
and how they help you
I
learn
merely
science,
choose
technology,
to
engineering,
recognize
or mathematics. But
what
they
is
recently took the
already there
interactivity on their platform
by
to a whole
utilizing
new
the
level.
vision
Check
of
out this
Christ.
example from their newest course,
Salvation
Scientific Thinking.
is a
You can
decision
change the size of the
made
top ball,
already.
drag and drop the stack, and visually learn about
When I
how
use the
motion
vision of
works.
Christ,
Brilliant is an
attack
interactive learning platform
grievances
built off a very
are
simple
not
yet effective
there to
principle.
choose.
You learn best while solving problems in real time.
That is why
Brilliant starts you off
I
with
always
simple
choose
problems, but they increase in
between
difficulty bit
truth
by bit until,
and illusion,
before you even realize it, you've learned a
between
fundamental
what
concept
is
in
there
logic, science,
and
math,
what
or
is
computer science.
not.
Join a community of over 8 million learners
The
today
light
by going to
has come.
www.brilliant.org/freedom and thought, or click the link in the description
light.
below, and you can sign up for
The
free.
light
As a
of
bonus for
true
those who are
vision
ready to
has
push themselves
no
further, the
alternative.
first 200 people will be hooked up with
Light
20% off the
has
annual subscription.
replaced
As
the
always,
darkness,
thanks for watching, and I'll
the
see you next time.
darkness has gone.
This video is made possible by Shortform.
These
The next
would
1,000
prove
visitors to use the
useful
link in the
forms
description
for
will receive
specific
unlimited access for 5
applications
days and
of
20% off an annual
this
subscription.
idea
In the
that the
Dhammapada,
light
the Buddha says that a
has
wise
come.
person is beyond fear, and
So
as
for
a result,
anything that
is
bothers
truly
you today,
free.
you can use these three
And there's a Zen
phrases,
story that shares a
like I've
similar
done for the
message.
last couple
During
of
a
days.
Japanese civil
It's a
war,
situation,
an army was taking
or
control
it
of
might be a
different villages,
person,
and in one
but you
village,
can use this
everyone had
statement
left
to kind
except
of
for the Zen master. So
let
the
that
general of the
thought
army
go.
got curious
Let that egoic
about who
thought
this
go.
man was and went to the temple to
This
see.
situation,
The general wanted the Zen
this
master
cannot
to submit to
show
his
me
will.
darkness,
And when the
for
master
the
would
light
not submit,
has
the general
come.
took out his sword and said, "Fool, don't you
The
see?
light
I'm the
in
type of
you
man that can put a sword
is
through you
all
without
that I
blinking
would
an eye."
see.
To which the master
Blank.
calmly said, "Don't you see? I'm the type of
Or whatever
man
name you need to
who
put
can
in
have
there.
a sword
Billy
put
Blank's my
through
example
him
name.
without blinking an eye."
I
That's what
would
true freedom
see
is, isn't it?
in this
To be without
only
fear.
what is
Because as long as we
there.
fear something, we're controlled by that thing. As long as we
Whatever
fear the
this
sword,
happens to be.
there's always a tyrant behind it trying to control us.
Okay.
Only a mind
Review
without
of
fear
left
is truly
lesson
free,
76.
unable to be controlled by something or someone else. So can I purge the mind of fear once and for all?
I am under
That's
no
what I'm interested
laws
in
but
exploring,
God's.
and I'm going to explore that idea through a dialogue.
I am under no laws but
The following
God's
is a
laws.
conversation
Is
between
the
a monk
perfect
and a student.
statement of my
Monk.
freedom.
Fear is blinding.
I
It's
am
controlling.
under
If
no
you step into a
laws but
forest,
God's
you'll imagine there's a
laws.
bear in the trees, and you'll see
I am
everything through that
constantly
fear
tempted
in relation
to
to
make
that
up
fear,
other
which means you won't
egoic
see the world
laws
as it is.
and give
Fear projects the
these
bear
laws
into
of
every
the
dark
ego
corner,
power
into the
over
rustle
me.
of every bush,
I
into the
suffer
snapping of every twig.
only because
Fear
of my
consumes the
belief
mind,
in the laws of the
distorts
ego.
it, and controls it.
These
And that's why
laws
it's
of the
blinding.
ego have no
Student.
real effect
But
at
fear
all.
protects you, doesn't it?
I'm perfectly
If you
free
think there's
of
a
the
bear in the
effects
woods, you'll be
of
more
all the
careful, which will
laws
keep you safer, don't you
save
think?
God's laws.
No, that's a myth.
And God's
Fear
laws
won't protect you.
are
Understanding
the
that
laws
bears
of
exist,
freedom.
that there are bears in the forest, the dangers of bears, and how to deal with those dangers is
specific
what really
forms and
protects you.
applying this
Understanding
idea
protects you,
that I'm under
not
no
fear.
laws but
And
God's,
actually, fear will
the
prevent your
following
understanding from
suggestions
growing.
would be helpful.
How does fear prevent your understanding
My
from growing?
perception of this
Fear leads to
shows me that I
fixation
believe
on the fear-producing
in
image.
egoic
If you're
laws
afraid
that
someone is
don't
following
exist.
you project them into every dark corner,
In other words,
into
whatever
every
you're
alleyway,
looking at,
into
the
every car
situation,
driving behind you, and so on. Fear
my
is a
perception
blinder that
of
largely
this
prevents you
shows
from
me I
seeing the
believe
world.
in egoic
Think about the
laws that
last time you were
don't
afraid in the
exist.
forest. Did you stop to take in new views,
Another one.
look at new
I
forms of
see
life,
only
and
the
analyze the
laws of
world in a new
God
way? Or
at
were you
work
so fixated
in
on the
this.
fear-producing image that it was all you could see and
Let
think
me
about?
allow
Fear
God's
prevents you from
laws to
learning.
work
If
in
you're afraid
this
that someone will break
and
into your
not
house,
in my
the doors
own
will never feel locked
ego's
enough to you.
laws.
You'll keep checking. Are they locked? Are they still
That's
locked?
the lesson.
How about now?
Short and sweet
You've seen
today.
that the door is locked,
So let's
but you
take a
keep
deep
checking.
breath.
Why? Fear
Relax for
doesn't
a
allow
moment.
the mind to update its
We'll
knowledge.
meditate on these
It
two
doesn't let you
ideas.
learn. How do I
And
overcome
we'll seek
fear?
this learning deep
How do I
inside
clear
of
it
us so we
from
can
my
take it
mind?
with us today, out
To
into the world to
overcome
bring
fear,
peace
you have to pull it out
and love,
completely from the root.
like Jesus
So
wants
let's
us
get to the root of fear.
The light has come.
Where do we start?
I am under
Fear
no
is produced by
laws
thought. The thought of
but
a bear
God's
attacking you,
laws.
or losing your money, or losing a loved one, produces fear. So fear arises from an image of future pain. Then why do I have these thoughts? All thoughts arise from desire. The desire to protect yourself from
All
pain,
right.
physical or psychological,
Take a nice deep
leads to fear.
cleansing breath.
Think about it. If you want to
Get
keep
in
yourself
connection with
secure,
the source
you'll begin to imagine
and
all
the
the
surface
ways
beneath
that
you.
security can be threatened. You'll think, what if
You'll
someone
let your
crashes
energy
into me
reach
while
down
driving?
into the
Or
earth
what if the house
to
catches
connect
fire
to the
while I'm
center of our
sleeping?
planet.
Or what if everyone makes fun of me?
All of
Or
us
what if there's a
residing on
snake
this
in the
planet.
grass? And all of these
With the
images
energy inside
create
of
fear
us,
in the mind.
We are so
Okay,
much greater
but
than
the
some of
desire
our
to
parts.
protect yourself from pain sounds
So
reasonable.
let your energy
What's
reach
wrong
down
with
into
it?
the center of the earth
You
and
think it's
connect with
reasonable?
everybody else
Fair
here.
enough. Let's take a closer look
Everybody
at
on
whether
this
it is.
planet,
Can you protect yourself from
whether they
pain?
want to
A
participate
tornado
or not,
can destroy your home
we can
tomorrow.
call them in.
You can't control that.
Our
A car could swerve off the road and
light
hit you.
inside of
You
us
can't control that. Someone
embodies
else
the
can get
love
you
of
sick.
God
You can't
and
control
invites
that.
the love
Protection
of every
from
other
pain
being
doesn't
on the
lie
planet
in your hands.
to bring
It lies
peace
in the hands of
to our
fate.
group
With
and
all due
to
respect,
everybody.
that sounds dumb. Are you saying I should just leave my security in the hands of
Fill
fate?
up your lungs.
Should I just go cross the road
Hold
blindfolded
that
then?
air inside
Should I just
for a
lie in
moment
bed and
or
do
two,
nothing? Let
and then
fate handle
release
it all?
with a nice,
You're misunderstanding me.
comfortable breath.
You don't really have a choice. You could build a super secure
Take a
underground
second
bunker,
deep
and a
cleansing breath
supernova
in.
can still take the Earth out. You
Fill
can
your
isolate
lungs
yourself
up
from the
to
world,
capacity,
but
let
you'll
your
still feel
belly
the pain of
expand and your
alienation,
chest
isolation,
rise.
and loneliness. You
And
can cross
hold
the road
that
blindfolded if you want, but you'll probably get hit
Just
by
a
a car.
moment.
You can lie in bed all you want, but you'll probably rot. I'm not saying you
And then
should do
release with
anything,
control.
but I'm saying whatever you do,
Nice,
fate will have the final
cleansing
word.
breath.
Fate will decide the consequences
Breathing
of your
out
actions, but you
everything
can
we
control
can.
your actions.
All
So what
the
do I
way.
do? First,
And
do
now
you
take
agree
your
that your
deepest
security
breath of the
ultimately
day.
lies in the
Deep
hands of fate?
cleansing breath
We can't
in.
move forward unless
Fill
you
up
do.
from the bottom
I
all
do,
the
but now I'm afraid of
way
fate.
up to the top.
What if fate decides to give me
Every little
pain?
bit,
Yeah,
breath,
you still have two
every little bit
fears,
of air you
the
can
fear
get
of
in those
fate
lungs.
and the fear of pain.
Hold
So let's
on
start
to
by
it for a
understanding fate. When you throw a ball
That
in the air,
breath
it's the
of
fate of that
life
ball,
in
as
you
far as we know,
blesses
to
the
come back
world.
down. When a plane acts in accordance with aerodynamic laws,
Release it with
it's the fate
love.
of the plane to fly.
Nice
When water
controlled
reaches a certain
breath.
temperature, it's the fate of that water to
And
evaporate.
rest
Do you
for a
agree with
moment
all of this?
while I read through
Yeah,
this
I
lesson.
agree. So fate is like the merchant or accountant we all trade with. There's a contract by which fate trades, and the best we can do
Today we
is
have
to
an
try and
opportunity
understand that contract. By learning
to
the terms of
allow
that
the
contract,
light
you can
of
lessen the
God to
pain you
flow
receive from fate
through
over
us.
time. Okay, that makes me
Heal
feel a bit
us
better, but I still have the
and
fear
heal
of fate
those
giving me
around
pain.
us.
Yeah, and now we're down to the final fear. The fear of fate giving me
Today,
pain.
the light
How do I overcome
has
this final
come.
fear? There are two things that
In
have to be
choosing
true
salvation
to eliminate
rather
this
than
fear.
attack.
So let me ask you a question. What if the pain
I
fate gives you is
choose
unnecessary? How
to
would that make you feel?
recognize
That
what
would make me
is
resentful. Fate could have
already
not
here.
given me that pain, but did. I would resent fate for that. I'd
Salvation
resent the world for
is
that.
a
And I would be
decision
more afraid
made
of fate, because she can give me pain when I don't need it, at any time, and it won't teach me anything. All of that would be awful.
Choose
Exactly.
between
So the
truth
first thing that
and
must be true
illusions.
is that the pain we
Choose
receive is
between what
necessary.
is
Do you
there
accept that?
and what is not.
Okay, I accept that. But
The
I'm still
light
afraid of
has
feeling the
come.
pain. This brings us
I
to my
can
second
but
question. If
choose
the pain
the
fate
light,
gives you is unbearable,
for it
how does that
has
make you feel?
no alternative.
Afraid. I'm afraid of
has
receiving
replaced
a
the
pain that I
darkness.
can't bear. So that's
And
the
the dark
second thing that must be
is
true
gone.
to eliminate fear. Every pain fate gives you is bearable.
I
So when
am
you
under
believe that
no
fate gives you pain
laws
that
but
is
God's.
necessary and bearable, then fear vanishes from the mind.
I'm constantly
In the Dhammapada,
tempted
the Buddha says that a wise
to make
person
other
is
laws
beyond fear,
and give them
and as a
power
result
over me.
is truly free. And I explored this idea
They
more
only
deeply through a
lead to
dialogue.
suffering and have
I was
no real
interested in the
effect on
complete
me
elimination
at all.
of fear from the mind, and here's where I've arrived.
I
Fear is a
am
barrier that
perfectly
prevents the
free
mind from learning, and the source of
of the
fear
effects
is our desire to protect ourselves
of
from pain.
all
But we
laws
can't protect ourselves from pain.
except
Our
for God's
protection
law.
lies in the hands of fate. Fate trades by a
And
contract,
his
and it's possible
are the
to learn
laws
this
of
contract
freedom.
and lessen the amount of pain we receive in life.
So today,
But to completely eliminate
when we
fear
have
from the
something get
mind,
in our way,
two things have to be true.
if you stub
When
your
fate
toe,
does give us pain, it's necessary
somebody
and bearable,
makes you
and
angry.
only when fear vanishes are we able
I've
to
got
be
6
free,
sentences for you to
uncontrolled
use.
by
I'm
anyone.
gonna repeat
But as
those
long as
slowly.
fear exists in the mind, there's
I'll put them in
always
the
a
chat.
tyrant
I'll
with
put
a
them up on
sword
Facebook.
trying to control us.
But
As
these 6
always,
sentences,
this is just my opinion and understanding of the Buddha's words,
they
not
can
advice.
shine a light
Feel
on
free
any
to use this
shadow
information however you
that
like,
crosses your
and if you have a
path.
different take on his words, I'd love to hear your perspective in the comments. Do you want to get 10
So
times
for
more
any
out of the
idea
books
that
you
you
read
have
and learn powerful ideas faster? If your answer is
that
yes,
falters your
I
step,
recommend checking out this week's sponsor,
apply
Shortform.
this.
Shortform makes the world's best guides to
This
nonfiction
cannot
books.
show
They're
me
like
darkness,
book summaries
for the
on
light
steroids.
has
Each
come.
summary is super detailed, so you get the book's key
If it's
points at a
person,
deeper
the
level.
light in you
They also
is
have
all that I
interactive
would see.
exercises to help you apply the ideas you just learned, so you retain the
I would
information
see in
better
this
than reading
situation
alone.
only
And on
what
top of that,
is
they also add
truly
smart
there.
insights that connect one author's ideas to another. So in the end,
My
you have a
perception
broader
of
understanding
this
of the
situation
subject,
shows me
its different
I believe in
viewpoints,
laws
and a
which don't
complex
exist.
interconnected web of ideas. They cover a wide array of genres, including some of my
I
favorites such
see
as self-improvement,
only the laws of
philosophy,
God
and
at
psychology.
work
Right now
in
I'm enjoying the
this.
guide on Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules for Life. I've read the book before, but Shortform is
Finally,
helping me go through it with a
let me
fine-tooth
allow
comb
God's
and really
laws
absorb the deep
and
insights
not
within it.
my own.
And after this, I'm
to
probably
work
going to look at their guide
in
on
this
Meditations by
situation.
Marcus Aurelius. So if all of this sounds interesting to you, you're in luck, because the next 1,000
Remember,
visitors to
every
visit
shadow disappears in the
shortform.com/freedom and thought, or use the
And the
link
light
in the
is
description
in
below,
you.
will receive unlimited access for 5
when
days
you are
and
the
20%
light,
off an annual
You
subscription.
cannot
As
see
always,
shadows.
thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.
Imagine how bright that
This
light
video was
inside
made
of you
possible
must
by
be.
Brilliant, a math and science
Shine away the
problem-solving
shadows
website that makes
of
learning
anybody you
fun and
perceived as
rewarding.
an enemy before,
In Crime and Punishment,
or anybody
Fyodor
that might
Dostoevsky
seem like
wrote,
an enemy in the future.
"That's man's one privilege
This
over
is your
all
lifelong
creation.
solution to
Through
get
error, you come to
You
the
don't have to
truth.
play the game of
I am a
life.
man
It's
because I
that way.
err. You never reach any truth
So
without
today,
making 14 mistakes,
let's
and
let
very
that
likely
light
114. And a fine thing too,
the
in
light
its
inside
way.
of us,
But we can't
that's
even make
connected to
mistakes on our
every
own account.
other
Talk
person's light
nonsense,
inside
but talk your
them.
own nonsense, and I'll kiss you for it.
Brings peace.
To go wrong in one's own way is
and
better
joy.
than to go right in someone else's.
And so
Why is it better to go wrong in our own way rather than go right in someone else's?
So
What's the
now,
meaning behind this
let's
quote?
stretch a little bit.
As always, I'm going to
Get the
explore
blood
this
moving
idea
through
through a
our-
dialogue. For weeks,
Oh,
a young student had been having
stretch.
philosophical
Get the
conversations
blood
with a
moving through our
retired
limbs
priest.
a little
The
bit.
following is one of them.
Good
Priest,
morning, Tom.
I think it's
How are
better
you
to
this
go
morning,
wrong in
sir?
your own way rather than go
Sorry, I
right in
started
someone
without you.
else's.
Good.
Student,
That's
what?
wonderful.
How? Isn't it better to go
Wonderful.
the right way no matter
Well,
how you
we got a
get there?
good lesson
Like if you want to go
under
to
our
the
belts
grocery
here.
store, isn't it better to
I
follow
do
someone
have some
else's
notes that I can
directions
read.
and get there
Why don't we
rather
say
than
good
go the
morning
wrong
and
way on
take
your
a minute
own?
to see how we're doing
What
so
you're
far.
saying
I'll
sounds
be
nice
quiet for
in
a bit.
theory, yes. If someone could just give you the right directions to wherever you wanted to go, it would save
Hey,
you a lot
Rosa,
of
how are you
time.
doing? Hey,
But
Maggie,
you
how
must
are you doing?
agree that
Hey, Bill,
someone could
Janine,
just
how
as
are you guys
easily
doing?
give you the wrong directions, which could make your trip to the grocery store longer than it otherwise would have been.
I'm doing okay.
Yeah,
Thank
that
you
could
for
happen.
asking,
You have to
How
know
are
who to
you?
trust. And if you trust the right
Doing
people,
good.
you'll get to your destination faster than you would on your own.
Adriana
There's no
came
need to
in last
reinvent the
night.
wheel.
So
Okay,
we're settled
but how do you
in.
know who to
This
trust?
week we're going to try and move somewhere.
Well, you have to find someone who has a
have a place
proven
to
track
move.
record of saying the
That should
truth.
happen today
If
if
someone
all
has not
works
lied
out
in
the
the
way it's
past,
supposed
they're
to.
unlikely to lie in the
But,
present.
Good
But you have to
morning.
admit,
Congratulations.
just because
Yes,
someone hasn't lied or
congratulations.
misled you in the past, it doesn't mean they won't lie or mislead you now. That's true,
Thank you.
but the probability of them misleading you
It's
is
truly
lower.
a blessing.
Yeah, I get where you're coming from in a practical
All right, how
sense,
about
but I'm trying
I
to
could
show
take
you
a minute
something
to
you're
read
not
through the
seeing.
notes,
So someone gives you a piece of knowledge right now.
and,
How do
so I
you
can
know
give you a
whether
moment
to
change
trust
the
it or
page
not?
and find out.
If I know the person
back
who's
and
giving
find
me the piece of
75,
knowledge
76.
has a proven
Oh
track
my
record
gosh,
of
I
not
thought when
lying,
you
I
were
will trust
saying
it.
like
But if I
Adriana's
don't
right
know
here
their
next
track
to me,
record,
I thought you guys
I
were
won't
making
trust
like
them.
a joke about like
Okay,
her bubble
so
being right
imagine
next to your
this.
bubble. And
Let's
I'm
say
like,
you have a
she's
grandmother
next
who's
to
90
you
years
every
old
morning,
and has
Lee.
never
I don't
lied to you or
understand.
misled you once in your life.
Yesterday
And
she flew
unbeknownst
from
to you,
Mexico to
he has a
Boston,
sudden
so
malfunction
she's
in his
literally
brain,
in the
and he
chair
says
next
to
to
you,
me
if you jump off this
That's
cliff,
what I
the
thought he
next-
meant
you'll make
too.
$1
Her
million.
bubble was this.
Are you going to believe
I was
that
like, they're
claim
so
because of his
cute.
track record?
I'm
Of course not.
here next to
Exactly. So you're not
Oh,
choosing
that's
to
so
trust
great.
someone based
Wow.
off of their track
me.
record.
Yes.
And now we're back to the
Guys.
critical point. How do you know whether
Look
to
at
trust a piece of
all
knowledge
the
or not?
little flags she's got in her
Hmm.
book.
I guess I use
You
my
are
own
such a
knowledge and
good student.
experience to assess whether I can trust someone. But that brings us
Yes.
back to the same problem. Now, how do you know if you can trust your own
Easily
knowledge?
distracted by her as well. So
I guess if my knowledge was right in the past, then I can trust it.
life's getting
But we
better.
just talked about this. Just
love
because
it.
your knowledge worked in the past, that doesn't mean it will work now.
I love him.
You're right. But it's not like I can choose not
Oh
to
my
act on my
gosh,
own knowledge
so
and past
beautiful, you guys.
experience.
Thank you.
I have no choice.
Loving each
I have
other.
to act based on the sum total of my life
Pleasure.
experiences. So I have to act on my knowledge, whether it's true or not. How can I act in any other way? No, exactly. You're right. You have no choice but to act on your
73.
own knowledge at any point in time. Even when you're getting directions from someone else, you're deciding whether to trust them or not based on your own knowledge, right? Yeah. So what are you trying to say? I'm saying the problem is not about trust, like you originally thought. Trust is irrelevant. You have no choice but to act on your own knowledge. So the real problem is whether or not your knowledge gets better or worse over time. Do you agree? Yeah, I do agree actually. So how does our knowledge get better over time?
Got it.
Let's think about this together.
There is
Imagine that
no
all your
will
life,
but God's
all you've
will.
ever seen are red apples. You'd
Lesson
probably believe that
75
all
is
apples
the
are
light
red
has
because
come.
you've never seen anything
Light
that
is a
suggests
symbol
otherwise.
that
And as you see more and more red
accepted
apples,
God's will.
this belief remains constant. But one day,
Is your
you come
will.
across a complete anomaly, a green apple.
The light is always
This anomaly
there.
falsifies your belief
God's will
that all
has
apples
never
are red.
changed,
And now you're
just
confronted
as
with a
God's
choice.
love
Do you
for his
update your
creations
knowledge or not?
flows
Do you tell
continuously.
yourself that apples are not
We
only
can
red?
deny that
Do you
flow,
tell yourself
but
that
we
they can be
cannot
green and maybe
stop
even
it.
other colors too? Or do you
We
ignore
deny
the
God's
anomaly?
will and
Do you
refuse
tell
to
yourself
accept
you
God's love
hallucinated
when we
it?
allow our
Or
mind
do you
to
tell
slip
yourself
into fear
that it wasn't even
and
an
hold
apple?
grievances.
Obviously, I
Our
accept
grievances
that
become
apples
the
can be
dark
other
clouds
colors
that
too.
block the
Why wouldn't
light
I?
That is God's will.
Well, what if we were
from
talking
our
about
split
something
minds.
other than apples? Imagine that you're in a marriage with
Grievances
someone for 10 years,
arise from our
and you
split
find
minds'
evidence that
belief
they may be cheating
that
on you.
someone or
That
something
evidence is an
outside of our
anomaly.
own mind
It
has the
contradicts
ability
everything you
to make
believed
us
about your
happy
spouse.
or to
Will you
save
welcome that
us.
anomaly into your life
Our
with
ego
all of
holds
its
grievances
implications?
whenever
will
someone
you
fails
ignore
to
it?
follow our ego's plan for our happiness.
You're right. That is a lot harder
When
to
this
answer.
happens,
Honestly,
Our ego
I don't know what I
uses
would
the
do in that
blame,
situation.
shame, and guilt game to try
Yeah,
and coerce
it's a lot harder,
the
isn't
other
it?
party
So the improvement
change
of your
their
knowledge
behavior
depends on how
adopt
open you
our
are to
plan.
anomaly. You keep using that word,
Our grievances
anomaly.
come from our
What does
belief
that mean?
someone should have done
An
something
anomaly is anything that
and therefore
falsifies
failed
or
to
contradicts
meet
your own
our
knowledge.
needs.
So the green apple,
If
for
someone
example,
had
is
acted
an
differently,
anomaly because
we
you
would be
believed all apples were red.
Grievances
But if you believed
focus
apples were red and
us
green,
on
it would
past
not be an
actions and
anomaly.
rob us
Okay,
of our
that makes sense. So
ability
what does it mean to
to
be
be in the
open to
present
anomaly? When
We bring
something
our past to
falsifies
the
your
present.
knowledge, do you
Continue
accept
to
it
allow
or
these
ignore it?
past grievances
In other words,
to
can you
impact
admit to being
how
wrong?
we react
If you can,
from
you are
present
open
time.
to anomaly. So do you see how this
You
all
need to
relates to
forgive
the
your
original
past.
question?
For the past
To be
cannot
honest
harm
with you, I
It's
forgot what we
over.
were talking about in the first
If you
place.
choose to drop
That's
your
okay.
grievances
It
that
happens.
bind you
In
to
the beginning,
past,
I said I think it's better to go wrong in
If
your own
you
way
ask
than go right
the
in
Holy
someone
Spirit,
else's. Oh
the
yeah.
Holy Spirit will
So how
not
does that
fail
relate to what you
help
just said?
Reframe your
Well, we
story
both agree
about a past
that one of the
event
main
so
problems
it
in
can be
life
viewed
is whether or
as a
not your
beneficial
knowledge improves
learning
over
lesson
time.
that was
We did.
required
And what
so you
conclusion
could
did we come
continue
to? How does
on
your
your
knowledge
journey
improve over
of
time?
reawakening.
I guess the answer comes
You will
back
not
to what
be
you
able to
originally
see the
said.
light
Your
as
knowledge
long
improves
as you continue
when you're
to
willing
hold
to go wrong
grievances
in your own way.
and
But you
fail
have to walk your own path
to
and be
forgive
willing to admit when you're wrong.
your past.
You have to be willing to confront your errors instead of ignoring them. So it looks like we're in agreement. In Crime and Punishment,
Lesson
Fyodor
73 was, I
Dostoevsky
will
wrote,
there
"To
be
go
light."
wrong in one's own way
I'd like to go back
is
to
better
that
than
lesson
to go
and
right
discuss
in
it in
someone
reference to
else's,"
the grievances
and
and
explore the
forgiving
meaning
your
behind this
world.
idea through a dialogue.
Below is a passage
To walk your
from
own
that lesson.
path is to realize
Now, like
that
to
you are
address.
always acting on your own knowledge. Even when you're getting directions from
73,
someone else,
paragraph number
you
2.
choose to take their advice based
You can
on
see
your
it on
own
the screen
understanding
if
of
you,
the world.
join me on
And when
video.
you realize that all of your actions always come back
This
to
part
your
also
own knowledge
comes
in
from
some
A Work in
form,
Miracles
and you
course.
decide to take responsibility for that,
A Course
and you
in
decide
Miracles,
not to
Workbook
blame
for Dummies.
anyone else for your actions, then you're walking your
The
own
ego's
path.
idle wishes
But to
and
go wrong
grievances
in your own way
are the
means that you
partners
realize
or
that at some point
co-makers
you will come
in
across an
picturing the
anomaly,
world
and this
you see.
anomaly will falsify or
The
contradict your
wishes
knowledge.
of the ego
And
gave
if you
rise
admit
to
to
the
being
world you
wrong,
see,
if you don't
and the
ignore the
ego's
anomaly,
need
if you
for
face your
grievances,
errors head on,
which are
then as
necessary to
Dostoevsky said,
maintain the
your
world that
errors
you
can move
see
you
with your
closer to
eyeballs.
the truth. As always,
Peoples,
this is
the
just my
world you
opinion
see,
and understanding of
with figures
Dostoevsky's
that
words,
seem to
not
attack you
advice.
and
Feel
call
free to use
from
this
for
information however
righteous
you like,
judgment.
and if you have a different take on Dostoevsky's
These
words, I'd
figures
love to hear your
become the
perspective
middleman
in the comments.
the ego employs
And while we're on the
to
topic of
traffic
updating
in
your
grievances.
knowledge, if you're looking for a fun way
These
to improve your
figures that
understanding of the
people,
world,
your
I recommend
ego's
checking
world,
out
seem
this
to
week's
attack
sponsor,
you
Brilliant.
and
You
stand
may have heard me
between
mention
your
Brilliant before,
awareness
and how they help you
and
learn
your
science,
brother's
technology, engineering,
reality.
or mathematics, but they recently took the
Because
interactivity
you
on their
behold
platform to a
and
whole
judge
new
these
level.
figures that seem
Check
to
out
attack
this
you.
example from their
You do
newly
not
redesigned
know your
Mathematical
brother's
Fundamentals
or
course.
your
You might remember the
higher
Pythagorean
self's
theorem from school,
reality.
like what the formula is, but in this lesson, you're moving around triangles and actually proving that a squared plus b squared is
Your
equal to c
shared
squared.
will with
It's
God
pretty cool, and there's
is
a lot
lost
more
to
where
you
that came from.
in this
Brilliant is an
strange
interactive
bartering
learning platform
in which
built off a very
egoic
simple
guilt is
yet
traded
effective
back
principle.
and forth.
You learn best while
Grievances
solving
increase
problems
with
in
each
real
exchange.
time. Brilliant
Can
starts
such
you
a
off with
world
simple problems,
have been
but they increase
created
in difficulty
by
bit
the
by bit
will
until before you
the Son
even
of
realize
God
it, you've learned
shares
a
with
fundamental
his Father?
concept in logic, science, math, or computer science.
That was a question.
Join a community of over 8 million learners today by going to
Your shared will with God is lost to you in that
www.brilliant.org/freedom-and-thought,
bartering
or
in
click
which
the
the
link in the
egoic guilt is
description below,
traded back
and you can sign up for free.
and grievances
As a bonus
increase
for
with each
those who are ready to
exchange.
push themselves
Can such a
further,
world
the
have been
first
created
200
by the
people
will
will be
the
hooked
Son
up
of
with
God shares
20%
with
off
his
the annual
Father?
subscription.
Did God
As always,
create disaster
thanks for
for his
watching,
Son?
and I'll see you next time.
Creation is the shared will of both the Father and God's Son together. Would God create a world that kills himself? Or would God create a world that kills himself?
This video was made
Because we're
possible
the
by
Son of
Brilliant,
God, we have
an
the
online
ability
platform
to
for
call
math and
into our
science
awareness
that makes learning
the
fun
events
and
we
rewarding.
wish to experience.
Productivity is effective movement.
As discussed
It's
in
running in the
yesterday's
right
lesson,
direction
your mind is a
for the longest
broadcast tower that
distance.
signals to your
It's
world
about making the greatest
what your
progress
ego
towards your
expects
goals
to see
in the shortest amount
and
of
what
time.
it desires
And the key to
experience.
productivity can be boiled down
Although
to a simple
you do
equation.
not control every
Distance
detail
equals velocity
of the
multiplied by
circumstances
time,
and
which equals
conditions
another set of
that surround
variables.
you.
In this video, I'll
You
explain
do
all of the
control
variables,
the purpose that
giving you the
assign
ultimate
those
guide
events
to productivity.
and how you choose
Let's
to
start by
interpret
analyzing
them
you.
as your story.
You're an organism with a
Your
limited amount of
beliefs
energy that you can
about your
spend each
story,
day.
not
As you
the
go about your
actual
day,
objective
moving,
retelling
thinking,
of all
acting,
the facts
this energy
and
bar is slowly
circumstances
draining.
surrounding the
And if you're
event
mindless of how you spend this
become the
energy,
history
you'll
lesson
end each day with
that your
nothing left to
egoic
show for
mind
it. So learning how to
carries
use your own
into the
internal
present
energy
moment.
is critical to
It's
being
these
productive.
beliefs
And the
from your
best way
past
to leverage your
that your
energy
ego
is by
references
performing what
to
I
ensure
call sprints. Sprints
that
are
its
time-bounded
past
work
beliefs
sessions that require intense
continue
focus,
to
active
influence
participation
and
in
color
an
current
activity,
events.
and pushing
Their
yourself
present
beyond your current limits. Working
becomes a
sprints,
replay
the ones I'm talking about in this
of
video,
your
are just
past.
like real
The
sprints,
present,
a
not there,
strenuous
but,
and intentional use
the
of your
present
energy.
becomes a replay.
If you're a student, sprints are when you study at your desk
You've
with
got
no
the same thoughts
distractions,
going
and you're
in kind of a
actively working
circular
on
fashion
homework
in your head,
problems,
a cyclical
recalling
fashion.
flashcards, deconstructing a
continues
text,
to go
writing an
with the same
essay,
thoughts
or doing
over and
practice
over.
exams,
You can
not
be
reading over your
assured
notes or highlighting.
those are the ego's
If you're a
thoughts
hockey
trying to
player,
convince you
it's
of a reality
intentional and
that's not
strenuous practice
actually
on your
true.
conditioning,
It's
puck
replaying your
handling,
past,
passing, or shooting,
imagining
not
your future
idly skating
failures,
around and
something
shooting
like
on the
that.
net for fun. If you're a writer, it's
We've been
hammering out your words
indoctrinated into a
and
fear-based
performing
thought system
surgical
that
revisions.
tells us
The
we're
purpose
a
of a
body,
sprint is to make
and that
effective
outside
progress towards your goals
forces
by
impact
focusing your
our
energy
life.
on a singular
The
task
forces are
that
beyond our
challenges
control.
you. And this brings us
belief
back to
that
the
we
key
are
formula.
all separate, limited
Every sprint
ego
has
bodies
3
give
key
rise
components:
to our ego's
distance,
plan
velocity,
for our
and
happiness
time.
and salvation.
And I'm going to break down each one,
The ego's
starting with
plan
distance.
revolves around
Distance is the measure
influencing
of
these
our
outside
productive
forces,
output.
so that
If
it
we're
minimizes
running,
the
it's the
negative
literal
effects
miles or
and
kilometers we've
maximizes
traveled.
the potential
If we're writing,
benefits.
it's the number of words or
The
pages
ego's
we've
plan
written.
tries to manipulate
If we're
these
studying
outside
fluid
powers
dynamics,
so that we can manage
it's the number of practice
and when
problems that
necessary,
we've
mitigate
solved.
the influence of these
Distance
powers
is the measurable
over
fruits of our
lives
labor,
and
and it
still
shows us if what
get
we're
our
doing is effective.
needs met.
Our goal is to increase the distance
Since
we
we're
run with each
victims
sprint,
to the whims
and there are
of these
2 ways to
outside
do
forces
this:
that are beyond our
increase our
control,
velocity
we
or
cannot
increase the
eliminate
time we
them
work
from
for.
impacting our
Let's start by
lives.
analyzing time.
Our ego's
Time
plan,
with a big T
therefore,
can be broken
centers
down
on
into 2
manipulating these
smaller
forces
components:
so they can
time with a little t
favorably
and n.
follow our ego's
N is the number
plan
of sprints
for
we
our
decide to do in a
body's
day,
safety.
and T is the length of each sprint.
Since
For
the
example,
ego's world
when I
is
write,
based
N is 4
on
and T is
its
30
belief
minutes.
in lack,
That means I do 4 sprints a
limitation,
day that last
and
30
fear.
minutes each.
This
30 minutes is how
fearful
long I can
world
successfully stay intensely
is
focused in a
a
single sprint.
zero-sum game.
And after 4 sprints
In
a
order to
day,
get
I'm
your
pretty
needs
mentally
met.
exhausted. You can experiment with the number of sprints
In
you
order to
do in a
get your
day
needs
and
met,
how long you
have
do
to
them
take
for
from
until
somebody
you find a
else.
mix that works for
There's
you.
always
The goal
winners
is to get both
and
variables,
losers
N and
in
T,
this
as
game.
high as possible, but in a way where you can stay consistent. Going back to my writing example, I can
The
consistently
ego's
do
plan for
4
your
sprints a day
salvation
for
always
30
entails
minutes each
making a
without
good
fail.
deal. If
Keyword:
you're to get your
consistently.
needs met, your ego
Consistency
must
depends
barter
on
and
discipline,
make the best
not
deal possible.
motivation. Here's what
You
happens if you
must
work off
sacrifice
motivation.
something
You'll get excited and do 4
to get
sprints
something
for 1
of
hour each
equal
on
or
the first
greater
day
value.
and exhaust yourself.
The
You'll
goal
probably
for
do 1
all
sprint for
your
1 hour the
ego's
next day,
plans is to
15 the next,
always
and then
make
you'll
the
give up
best deal
altogether.
possible.
But here's what it looks
It
like if you
seeks
work
to
off discipline.
sacrifice the least
On the first day,
and
you work
gain
for
the
15
most.
minutes, and you
Your
still
ego does
feel like
not
you have
believe
energy in the
that to
tank,
give is to
but you
receive.
wait.
Instead,
The next day,
your
you do
ego
2
operates
sprints,
under the
and you still
fear-based
have more
belief
energy
you
in the
only
tank,
give
but
what
you wait
you
again.
get.
On the third day, you do
You
3
only
15-minute sprints,
give
and on the
to get.
fourth, you do 4, slowly
What
ramping
the
it
words
up
in the
each
book
day.
say are,
But on the
instead, your
5th day,
ego
you
operates
try
under
working
the
20 minutes
fear-based
each sprint
belief
instead of
that
15,
you
and you still
give
have some energy
only
left
to
over.
get.
So on the 6th day, you try working
To
for
the
30
ego, your
minutes,
salvation
and you
is
realize that you're a little
contingent
tired
upon
this
its
time.
ability
And in fact,
to
that tiredness spills
constantly
over
make
into
a
the
good
next
deal
day, so now you
to
only do
ensure
10-minute
your
sprints now.
continued
Now you've
survival.
successfully found your limit, and on the
The
8th
ego
day,
enters into
you
special
revert back to
relationships with other
20-minute
people and
sprints,
things in an
which you
attempt to
consistently
ensure that your
maintain
needs are met.
going forward.
In the special
Discipline,
relationship,
not
each party
motivation,
agrees
leads to
exchange
consistent
some of their
results,
limited resources.
and discipline depends on
If the
thoughtful
other party
experimentation,
surrenders
self-awareness, and
something that the
self-respect.
other
We have to
perceives
discover
to
how
be
much we can
of
push
equal
ourselves,
or greater
finding
value.
a healthy balance between being too
These
hard and
special
too lenient.
relationships are what
When
your
it comes to
ego says
productively
you
managing your
need
time and
to
energy,
make you
one of my
happy or
favorite
safe.
pieces of advice comes from Hemingway.
Your ego's plan
Here's what he
is
said:
designed
you write
to
until you
ensure
come to a place
that
where
the
you still
body's
have your
perceived
juice and know
needs
what will happen next,
are met
and you stop and try to
at
live
the
through until the
lowest
next
cost
day
to
when you hit
your
it
own
again. Hemingway
limited
didn't work
resources.
until his tank was empty, like many overly motivated, eager beginners tend to
The
do.
ego
He
believes
kept a
its job
consistent regimen,
is to
and he always ended his
constantly
workday
monitor
with some
and
energy
judge
left in
these
his tank,
special relationships
when he knew
to
how he would
ensure
continue
they
his
are
story the
paying off
next
as
day.
expected.
By ending in a place
The
where you
ego
know what
expects
step to
a
take
good
next,
return on this
you'll build
investment. This is
anticipation
why our
that will
egos
let
are
you
big
hit the
judging
ground
machines.
running on the next
When
day.
another party fails to
Productivity,
perform as
when it
anticipated,
comes to the
the
things that
ego
matter,
files
is
a
always a
grievance.
long-term marathon.
It is a complaint
And to
against
run
the
the
other party
marathon,
for their
you have
breach
to
of
learn
this
to manage your time
unwritten
in a way
contract.
where you can make consistent daily progress. And managing your time comes back to 2
It's
factors:
interesting to note
the number of
that the
sprints you
agreement
do,
between
and
the two parties
and how
not
long they
necessarily
are. T.
openly negotiated,
But time is not the
or
most
even
critical factor
known
for
to
being
both
productive
sides.
for 3 reasons.
In each relationship,
Reason
each
1,
party has
your
their own
upsides are
specific
limited.
and
Once you're
secret
working
agenda.
around 60 to 80 hours a
This
week,
agenda
you're
is
reaching the maximum
modified
of
by
what's
our
probably
egos
possible for
as
the
we
average
move
person.
through time.
The rest
Our
of your
egos
gains
are
in
always
productivity will
seeking
come from your
to
velocity,
renegotiate
not
the
your
contract.
time. Reason 2.
or
The returns
to
are
find a
diminishing.
better deal
Once you're
elsewhere.
working 80 hours a week,
These
you'll probably
secret
burn out and
agendas
become
one-sided
tired,
deals tend
reducing
to
your
make
long-term
these
productivity.
relationships unstable,
Reason 3.
as each
And
party
the final
actively
reason,
seeks to
time
find
is an
better
imprecise
deals
metric.
elsewhere.
When some people say that they worked for
Because
60
you believe
hours,
body is
what
you.
they really mean is
You're
that
the
they
body.
sat in an office
You
for
proceed
60
lack
hours,
in your
doing a
world.
little work here and there.
You
Or
believe
think
your
about a
ego
college
has the
kid who says
plan
he was studying at the
that best
library all
ensures
day,
your needs
when
are
he was
met.
really just sitting in the library with
When
his
these
books
other
open,
parties
chatting to a
fail
friend.
to perform
Time passes
up to your
regardless
ego's
of what you do,
expectations,
so it becomes a very
grievance is
easy
filed
metric to
against the
fool
offending
yourself
party.
with. Now let's move on to the
The
more
grievance
critical
can be
factor
disclosed
when
to the
trying
other
to be
party or
productive:
just
velocity.
your own
Your
little
sprint
secret.
velocity is made up of two key
Full
components:
disclosure or
direction
fairness is of
D
no concern
and
to
stride
your
R.
ego's kangaroo
Let's start
court.
with direction.
Your ego
Obviously,
then
before you
judges
get
them
moving, you have to
guilty and
decide
punishes
which
them
way you want
for
to
their
sprint.
supposed crime
The direction
against
you run in is often
If
more
your ego
important
is to
than how
forgive
hard
the
you run.
offending party
Consider
some
this
type
example.
of apology or
Two mechanical
retribution
engineers take
is
jobs in
expected
different
in
industries,
exchange
one in the
for
oil
your
industry and one in
forgiveness.
HVAC.
This is
Assuming they
not
work with the same
true
intensity,
forgiveness.
the engineer in the oil
It's merely
industry will
another
likely make
example
more money
of your
based
ego
purely on the
playing,
direction he
let's
chose.
make a deal.
Or consider this: if you invested $100 in
It
Apple
is your
on
ego's
January
belief in the
1st,
illusion of separation
2002,
that creates
you would
the
have
conflict that you perceive of your
$34,000 today.
world.
But if you invested
Your ego's
$100 in
plan
Netflix on January
seeks to
1st,
minimize the
2002,
negative
you would have
consequences from the illusion that
$48,000.
time and
I
space
pulled these numbers
provide,
off an online
but the ego's
calculator,
secret
so they
agenda
might be
is to
inaccurate,
never allow
but the
your
underlying
decision
point remains true.
to
Where
rediscover
you invest your
that
energy
the
is
illusions
more
are
important than
not
how much you
real.
invest. But how do we decide which
ego's
direction to
plan,
run in? The
coupled with your
direction we
grievances,
choose is based on our
block the
values.
light,
The HVAC
which is
engineer,
God's
for example,
will
might
from your
value
sight.
environmentalism more
They
than
make
money,
the
whereas the
illusion
oil engineer
appear
values
real.
money more than environmentalism, which is why they chose their
True
specific
forgiveness
directions.
is
Of
different
course,
from your
this is just an
ego's
example.
definition
I'm
of
not saying
forgiveness.
all oil or HVAC engineers have
True
these
forgiveness
values.
comes
So the
from
question
following the thought
becomes,
system
how do we find our
of the Holy
values?
Spirit.
If you ask people what they value,
True
they'll
forgiveness,
say things like
not the
love,
forgiveness
kindness,
offered by your
honesty,
ego,
and
is
service.
what's needed
Then they'll rage
if
the
you are
next
to
time
see
someone cuts them
the
off in
light
traffic.
in your world.
Values are what we act out, not what we say. And oftentimes,
Those
we're
are the
not
notes
even
from
aware
lesson
of our
1.
own true values.
Let's pause for a
But you
minute
might be
and
able
think
to
about
discover
what
some of your values
says.
by reflecting on your past experiences. Think about a time someone made you very envious
Welcome
or
a
angry.
couple of you up
That
onto the
probably gives you
stage.
some insight into your values.
Actually,
Or think about your
I'll have to
idols.
reset the
Who do you
hands up
admire?
thing, and then
That might
will
give you
let
insight into your values. And don't lie to yourself. Ask yourself
raise
if
your
you would
hands
trade
if you're
places
down
with
there.
your
If you want to
idol.
join us up here,
Would you
we've got
rather
better
be Kim
audio.
Kardashian or Mother Teresa? Jeff Bezos or Gandhi?
Love to know
This might give you some insight
Rosa
into your
or
values.
Maggie, Bill,
But our
Jean.
values aren't set in stone. As we collect more varied life experiences, our values can change.
And Adrian.
We discover our values through experiences and reflection.
Well,
Reflect
good
on what
morning,
experiences you truly
everybody.
want, don't want,
Well, I'm really
and what
happy to be
values will
here.
take you there.
Here in the
Once you
room
determine your
and
values
here
and
with me,
directions,
I'm
it's time to work on the
super
next part of
happy now.
velocity,
Thank you.
your stride. Your stride
So,
is the actual action you
these
take to make
two
effective
lessons
progress towards your goal.
I
You have to
really-
identify it for yourself. If your goal is to write a book, then your
really
stride
like
is actually
simple
sitting at
for
your
me
desk
to
and writing
have
the
an
words
analogy.
each
I
day.
was talking to
If your
Kurt
goal
the
is to
other
become
day,
a
my
pianist,
ex-husband,
then
and
your
the
stride
weekend-
is
the
sitting
weekend,
down to play
this-
the piano.
this person really
Your stride is the
came
next
to me
action
with
you
all
can
the
take
content
to
of his
move
heart.
towards
He
your
was
goal.
feeling guilty.
Your
he
stride
let
is
go,
made up
but
of two
finally
components:
he's now
stride
really
length,
taking
L,
into consideration
and
to
rhythm,
read this book.
Y. Stride
And
length
he
is
was
the distance
really
between each step.
listening, paying attention.
rhythm is how often
he
you
wasn't
take each step.
understanding the
To improve your
concept of the
stride,
shadows.
you can work on either of these two
So
components.
I told him, well,
What
you
does
can
it mean
imagine
to
the
improve
sun.
your
The sun,
stride length?
it's the
Stride
sun.
length is a measure of how
So the sun
effective the
comes
action you
out
take
and
is
shines
with
on
respect to
everything.
your
So
goal. In
as
other
you
words,
think that
it's
you
a
are
measure
not
of
the
your
sun,
skill level.
that you are
What's
your
the
body.
difference between me
Imagine
sitting down
yourself
to write and
placed
Hemingway?
between the
Stride
sun
length.
and
Give us both
other
the
people,
same amount of
and
time to
one
write,
person
and you'll
in front
notice a
of-
disparity
in
between the
front
quality
of
of
one
our
person,
work.
but
If you give
looking
me and
back
Steph
at,
Curry the
like
same
giving
amount
your
of
back
time
to
to
the
shoot
sun,
hoops, he's going to
so
sink a
of
lot
course,
more in.
what you will
So how do
see
you improve your stride
reflected
length?
on the other
Through
person is
deliberate
your
practice.
shadow, because you
How does
think you're a
deliberate
body.
practice work?
You don't see
It's
the
pretty
light
simple.
coming
There are two
from the
components
sun.
to
You
deliberate
just see
practice:
your shadow,
action
your
and
shadow
feedback.
because you think you are a body.
If you wanted to improve improve your weightlifting form,
We are all
you could film yourself
reflections
lifting
of
and then
our
compare it to the
minds.
footage of a professional.
So
The goal
if you
is to
place
take
yourself
action and then
between
get
the sun
feedback by comparing
and
your
other
action
people,
to the
between the light
ideal
and other
action.
people,
Or in
your
other words,
significant other
take
or
action
whatever,
and compare your
mind
action
is
to
not
those of someone
looking
who's
up
more
to
skilled
God,
at what you do.
you will always see the
Alternatively,
shadows.
instead of filming yourself,
So I
you could
told
hire a
him,
coach,
well, what
and the
do you
coach has
have
an
to do in
understanding
order
of the
for you to
ideal,
see
and
the
so
other
he or
person
she
as
gives you
light
feedback
without
to help you
judgment?
move closer to it.
And he
If you
didn't
wanted to learn
understand.
how
I
to
just
produce
put my
music,
hands, like,
you might try to
one
recreate your
looking
favorite
to
beats or
each
music
other,
that you hear on the
one
radio.
facing like
Again, you're
towards
taking
the other.
action and comparing it
So
to
I
an
moved
ideal
my
to
hand
correct
and
your
I placed
action.
the hand
But
like
when we start
right
something new,
beside the
the
other
ideal
hand,
is
and I
often
said
way
to him,
beyond us. Comparing
in terms
ourselves
of
to the best
relationships, you
pianist,
need
for
to
example,
be one
may be
and one, but
discouraging
right by
and
their
unhelpful.
side,
So we
not
might compare
one in
ourselves
front
to
of each
lesser
other,
versions of the
because
ideal instead.
if you both
We can
are
imitate
not
people who are
looking to
just
see the
beyond us in
light,
skill level,
you will
slowly
always
inching
reflect
ourselves
each other
towards the ideal.
shadows.
Deliberate
that is in
practice
front of
usually
you, in
begins
front of
with
you, will not
imitation,
be the light,
but
will
as your
not see
skills
the
grow,
light in
you develop a
because you're
stronger
looking
relationship
at
to
that
the ideal
person and you're
archetype or
facing
idea itself,
back
and
to
you
the
shed
sun.
the need to imitate.
So you need to
You learn to
stand
act
at-
on your own
at the-
instead.
at the-
Now,
at
after
one
stride
side
length,
of the person,
the
so
final
you can feel
component
equal
is
and
rhythm.
both are looking
How
towards the
often
sun.
you take a stride. The
If
key to
you
rhythm
don't
is
put
creating
your
the
mind
right
always in
conditions
that-
to
in that
allow yourself to
perspective,
enter a
you
state
will
of flow.
always see shadows
Flow is a state
among
where your
everything
focus
that
is
you
pointed,
see around you,
singular,
because your
and
mind
unbroken.
is not
The key to
thinking in
creating a state
vertical.
of flow is to
Your mind will
remove
always
things
be
that break
thinking
your
on
focus.
horizontal,
There are
and
two
looking
ways
at
to
the
do
level of the
this.
form.
The first
And
way,
at the level of the
remove
form, all
all
we can see
external
with our
distractions from
eyes
your environment.
are
For
just
example,
partial
your phone, the
reflections
internet,
of light.
music, other people, so on and so forth.
When I did
Remove
this kind of
whatever might
analogy to
create
him, he
sudden
was like,
and unexpected
okay, I get
distractions.
it. Yeah, we are
The
all
second way,
equal.
work on
And if
something
we
in
don't
alignment
see
with your
this,
highest
if
value.
we don't force
The more
our
meaningful
mind
you find the work
to
you do,
always see the
the
light,
more important you feel it
we
is,
will
the
always
less
see
likely you are to let
shadows
things pull your
among
attention
ourse-
away from
among
it.
everything,
It's
among
very hard
ourselves,
to ever
among
live a
everything.
life free of
The
distractions
person
and
that is in
obligations
front
to
of us,
others,
that is trying
especially
to have
if you have
love in
kids
their
or a
lives,
large family.
will always, of
But
course,
if you can
will
work
look
on things you
at
find deeply
our own
meaningful,
shadow.
you'll be
So
less
it's really
likely
like
to have your
that
attention
simple,
suddenly pulled
but
away from the
in a
task at hand.
practical way.
For example, when people play video games
it's
or watch
just the
TV,
mirror,
they can keep their focus glued to their
the
screens
mirror
if they really
concept
need to,
that
even if there are other
your significant
distractions.
other is
That's
teaching
because
you
they find
the
the
content
activity
or
more meaningful
or
than everything else
the content
going on.
of your ego
The same
or
thing
of
can
your
happen when you're reading
light.
a gripping book or
So
sending
what do
an
you want to
important
show
message.
others? Your
So
shadow
finally, let
or
me
your
summarize
light? If
everything.
you want to show
Productivity
the
is
light,
movement,
you need to be
and one of the most effective
at
ways
the
to
same.
make
I mean,
successful
you don't
movements
get to
is by
think or see
performing
the other
sprints.
person.
A sprint is a highly focused,
like
intentional,
like
engaged,
in
and
front. You
time-bounded
need to
work
just
session
look at
that
to
pushes
that.
you beyond your current
And the other
limits.
person will
The
walk
goal of
the
each
path with
sprint
you.
is to travel the greatest distance towards your goal as possible. Distance is equal to velocity multiplied by time.
I did
The
that,
total
that
time you
analogy
sprint
for
for
him, and
each
he really
day
understood,
is dependent on how many
that
times
he
you
was-
sprint a day and
that
how
he
long you
was,
sprint for.
reflecting
Velocity is a
a lot
function
of
of the
fear
direction you
of
choose
his
and
life,
your
and he
stride.
started to
Your direction is based on your
said
values or
and tell
goals.
me
Your stride
parts of
depends
his
on your
life that
stride
he never
length
told
and
me
your rhythm.
before
Use
in
deliberate
all the years
practice
that
to
we worked
enhance your
together.
skills and
And he started
subsequently
to
your
really cry
stride
and
length.
say all the guilt
Learn
that
to
he
keep
was feeling
imitating
because I
people
was
slightly
now,
better than you until you surpass
moving my
them.
life like this.
Developing a
He
direct
was feeling
relationship
afraid
with the
that I
ideal
wasn't
itself.
gonna be okay,
And lastly,
that-
maximize your
and I said to him,
rhythm by creating
I'm
the
gonna be
optimal conditions
just
for flow.
fine as you're gonna
You can
be
do this
just
by
fine
removing
because now we
external
can
distractions
communicate to each other
and working
we
on
are not
something you
seeing
find
no
deeply
longer
meaningful.
grievances between us because we know now that I have divorced my ego and you are now my brother. I mean, we are now really like friends. So we might have failed as a couple, but we are not going to be separated ever.
Improving your
because we
skills
have
is one of the
Vera,
best
and now
ways
we
to
can
increase your
communicate
productivity. And
correctly
if you're a student looking to get
raise
ahead,
this kid.
I recommend checking
So I
out
want to
this
share
week's
that
sponsor,
because that part of our
Brilliant.
conversation with
Brilliant's
was
mission
really
is to help you achieve your learning goals. They
helpful
cover a
for
wide
him
array of
to
topics
have
such as
a
logic, physics,
graphic
mathematics, and
analogy
even
of
computer science
what we
in their
do with our
interactive
shadow.
problem-solving courses.
I hope it helps.
In their newest course, Geometry Fundamentals, you can discover the beauty of geometry in a simple and intuitive way. Learn about angle axioms, how to calculate perimeters and areas, 3D geometry, and much more. To check them out and start learning, just go to www.brilliant.org/freedomandthought, or click the link in the description below and you can sign up for free. As a bonus for those who are ready to push themselves further, the first 200 people will be hooked up with 20% off the annual subscription. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.
In typical circumstances, whenever we see a full eclipse of the sun in which the gas is in front of the sun and blocks the sun itself, and we still have the solar flares coming out surrounding the sun. In time and space, we tend to be walking around in a full eclipse of the sun. We look at that moon that's blocking the light of the sun, which we can call our game token, the body.
Let me immediately
And we
clarify
look at that,
things a
and
bit
we
by
think
telling you a
that
little bit
the
about the difference of the University of
energy
Chicago's writing
source
program.
or
We're
the
one of,
solar
as
flares
far as we
that are
know, two
coming
in the
from
country
our true
who takes
reality
what we
or
call
higher
a
self
top-down
behind
approach
it
to writing rather than
is
bottom-up.
really
Every other
coming
school in the country,
from
their
the
primary
body
constituency
itself.
is freshmen.
And we think that the
So most every
body
school has something
is
like
the
freshman
source
composition,
of
freshman writing, freshman
that
seminars,
aura
etc.
or energy
We don't
field.
actually
And I don't know
have that
if
course
for
here.
those of you that see auras,
As I remind people, Chicago is,
know that
I don't know if it's the
whenever
only
we talk about it, we
university in
tend
the
to
country, but
see or
one of the few that
believe
has more
that
faculty
the
than we have freshmen.
source of the aura
That's
or the
because our
energy
program
field,
teaches
in
throughout the medical
analogy,
school,
the
and they don't
solar
usually count
flares
those
that we
faculty
see
when they're
with
talking
full
about
eclipse of the
faculty
sun
ratios
is
to
coming
students,
from
but
the
we teach in the
moon.
medical school all the
In
time. And they're
reality, it's
chock-a-block
coming
with
from our
faculty because
higher
most of their
self.
doctors are also
And
faculty members.
we have to be aware
So when this
whenever
program
we
got
look
started in
at
the late 70s,
anything
early
in
80s,
this world,
our task was not to
we're
help the students, it was to
really
help the faculty.
seeing the
This writing program got
facade,
created
the
because the people on this
costume
campus,
that's
as
placed
the
in
guy who started
front
used to
of
say,
the true reality,
you know, our freshmen write
and
pretty well.
not the
By the time they're third and fourth year
reality
students,
of
they
the
don't
energy
write as well.
field, the source of the energy
Our graduate
field.
students struggle,
So you are really light,
but the people with the real
and
writing
we
problems are the faculty, which just
in
turns
time
on
and
its
space
head the standard notion that
tendency
writing is a
to
basic skill. The standard notion in the
assume
U.S.
that
and around
the
the world is
costume
reading,
that's
writing,
blocking the
arithmetic. You're
light
supposed to learn it in high
is the
school, or
light
grammar school,
itself.
high
So
school,
we
maybe a little
need
bit of
to
college.
look beyond,
But if you have to learn it
whenever we
after that,
look
there's
at
something
anything,
wrong with you, and
realize
therefore there's
that
something remedial
that's the
about programs
form
like this.
and not
I've been
really
talking to
the
people for 30
content.
years
Content is light.
who their
content is
main
energy.
reaction to any program I
Content
teach is that they do not
cosmic
want to be there,
consciousness or
and they
individuated
think there's something
consciousness,
a little
and
bit,
that's what you
you know,
truly are. And
offensive.
don't
I
get
teach a lot in
sucked
London.
into the
Let me tell you,
idea
you get a
that
whole bunch of Oxford and
game
Cambridge
token
educated
is
professionals or
your
academics
reality.
in a room
Hope
and
that
say,
helps,
we've brought in this
how-
guy to
how
help
the,
you with your writing.
you know, that you are that
And
light,
by the
and our
way, he's from
purpose
Chicago.
is to
You know, waves of hostility
not
coming
just
at
kind of
me across the room.
remove that idea of that
So I
body
need
that's
to,
really
I need
blocking
you to
the
know
light,
that
and
this
be
is
that
not a
higher
remedial
self
writing
instead of
course.
the
This is
facade.
not a course in
And the
anything that
facade
you
is
should have
our
learned earlier on
ego,
and didn't.
so to speak.
It is
that we place in
overwhelmingly not a
front to
course
block
in
the
rules.
true light
I
of
am
what
not
we
going to
really
give
are.
you rules for writing. In
Thank you.
fact, I'm going to spend a lot of the time attacking the fact that your
Thank you,
training
Tom.
has been rule-governed training. We
Yeah,
think
that
that
was
is
really helpful,
very bad for
Tom
people
and
who are operating
Adriana.
at the level that you're operating.
And
Rule-governed
wow,
training is very useful for
you know, when
people who
when you're in a
are, and forgive
relationship,
me for saying this,
so many
who are
things come
turning
up.
out a lot of writing, each of which is of relatively
What's
low
coming up for
value.
me
So if you're working at
is
a
it's
business
funny.
where you
My
have to
boyfriend
write
and
a
I, we
short
kept
memo every day or two
over the
to
years. I
convey
think I
some
mentioned that
information to
we
somebody,
fought,
it's fine
broke
to have a
up, got
rule.
back
It's fine to
together.
say, this is
It's
what
the
it's going to
same
look
thing. I
like,
think
here's
we
what your sentences should look
probably
like,
did
get
it
it
like
down.
3 times in
But
like
that is
10-year
not what you're
period. It's so
doing.
funny.
That is not the level of value
Um,
your work has to
and here we
generate.
are again.
And
We're
so one of the
realizing,
things that I'm
okay,
going to be saying
God
to
has
you is you
given
need
us
to
another
stop thinking about
opportunity,
rules and start thinking about
and it's like,
readers.
okay,
So here's the
and I'll realize
problem that
certain patterns
experts
of thinking
have.
keep
You are
coming up
in
for me that need healing,
our
and I struggle
vocabulary,
with it
you are what
still.
we call
But at least
expert
I see it.
writers.
Like I
What
can
this means
see
is
when
not that you are
something,
necessarily expert
my
at writing,
ego
although you may
brings
be
up
extremely
something
good at writers.
as a grievance.
But what it means is
And
that you are
sometimes I don't know
writing
how to,
about a subject
I
at
do know
which
to
you
go to the
have
Holy
expert
Spirit with it.
knowledge.
I pray about it.
You are not like high
And
school
instead of
students
looking
who are
at the
using their
form, like
writing
you
to
look at
introduce
the
themselves
sun, I
to
go to God with it.
something at a fairly basic
But
level.
sometimes
You are
it's so
operating
hard
at the most
because,
sophisticated levels.
you know,
When I work
staying
with
in that
faculty
place
on
of
this and other campuses, I'm
trust
working
and
with people
faith
who
and
are, after all, on the
just
frontiers of knowledge.
allowing,
They're
just
thinking
letting go
stuff
of that
nobody's thought
grievance.
before. This is
Because
very
the ego
hard
wants to have
stuff.
it. Like,
So
and say, oh, you're not doing
here's
this
what you're
now.
doing.
Look at him. You know, he's not
You
doing
are
that. You need
thinking
to
about
leave.
your world
See, you
in
know,
very
this is why you
difficult
left
ways.
before.
This is a terrifically good thing, and it's
And
the source of most of the value of your work.
it's so frustrating sometimes.
Now,
And
you are also writing about
even though I
that
was
world.
able to
And this is where it starts.
address certain
problem starts
things a
arising.
little bit at a time, I think I
Unlike a
shared before.
journalist,
And then
almost
just have to
surely
stay
you are
and
using your writing process
in
to
God
help yourself
and
think.
keep doing my lessons and
In other words, the thinking that you're
to
doing
stay strong.
is at such a level of complexity
So,
that you have to
but thank
use
you.
writing to help yourself do your thinking. This is quite different from high school students. My high school teachers told me, Larry, there are two different processes. First, there's a thinking process, then there's a writing process. I had a teacher who said to me, you are not ready to write your first word until you are finished thinking. And she said to me, to prove this to you, I'm going to have you, whenever you turn in a paper, I'm going to have you turn in the outline you used to do your thinking.
I was feeling really
It's
like
not a
this
problem for me. First I wrote the
huge,
paper,
sense of
then I wrote the
fear
outline.
and a little bit of guilt.
But I thought I was the only one. I thought everybody else, when they did this thinking, just, thought it till they were done, and then their essay, like Athena, burst from their forehead onto the page. I thought, I was trying to keep it secret that I didn't work that way. Nobody works that way. It doesn't mean you don't have outlines or a good idea. It doesn't mean you don't take notes. It's a good idea. It doesn't mean you don't have other ways of thinking, but you are using your writing to help yourself think. If you don't do this, for most people, you cannot think at the level you need to think. Quite different, say, from a journalist who's sitting down writing. A journalist is not using the writing process to think up new ideas about the world. You are.
I mean, I was disregarding her.
This means you have a very different set of writing
and I
challenges
was
than
really
anybody else
afraid
has. This is a course
what I
about those
felt in the
challenges.
past
Our program
of my
is
mother,
about those
because
challenges.
Because
here's the challenge.
When my mom took us out of the house,
You write this
and my mom
text,
my mom had
this
to
grant
work because she
proposal,
was
this
now a
article,
single
this
mom.
dissertation
I did
proposal, this
have
book.
kind of
You
abandonment,
actually generate it on the
issue,
horizontal
so I didn't
axis.
want her
You
to
actually
have,
generate the text while you are doing your
time
thinking.
outside of the house.
But
I
then,
wanted
you're
her
going to
for
send this
myself.
text out to
So
readers.
I didn't want to lose her, and I really
And the readers
have
are going to look
struggled
through that
with,
text,
for
and if
example,
you've done your
sleeping
job,
with
they're going to
the
change
light
the way they
off,
see the world.
or not sleeping
here's
with
the
my
problem,
mom. I had
symbolically.
this huge fear
You
of not
actually
sleeping with my
generate a
mom.
text on the horizontal
And
axis,
it was all that abandonment.
but whether
And
it
I
does
was
its job
really,
depends on the vertical
projecting
axis.
that into bare
And here's the
situation,
problem.
and could
Very
make me
predictably,
realize, no, that is your
experts
fear, that is your ego. And I was
use
thinking,
language
yeah,
in one set of
Vera is
patterns
not,
to do their
I'm not
thinking,
going to leave Vera alone.
but those
I'm
very
not
same
gonna leave
experts
her
read
here
with a
with
different
a
pattern.
maid or something. She's not going to
So
be
here's what happens.
by herself.
You have used your
here
text as you
no
must
matter-
use
I
it
mean,
to help yourself
I'm not willing
think,
to do that,
but you're going to
so
use
my
writing
life is-
patterns and language
So I
patterns
said,
that
yeah,
interfere
and
with
I
the
could
way your
clearly see
readers
that,
read when
yeah,
they read.
Now I'm
Even
catching
when those
more,
readers are also
easily
other
my ego
experts.
doing those things.
So you are interfering with their
there
reading
was another
process.
situation that we
when you're
spoke
writing.
about.
I promise
with
you, you
Kurt,
are.
And he was,
What
for
happens
example,
to readers
telling me
when you
things
do
that
that?
I didn't know that happened during this first months of this year.
The last thing they're
And
going
it
to do is they're
all
just going to
those
stop.
situations happened in front of
happens
my
before
nose,
that?
and I didn't
What
know
leads up
about
to
it.
that
And
stopping?
so I
You're
started
absolutely
to
right,
feel
they
like
stop.
this kind of
But let's talk a little bit about
resentment
what leads
because
up to it.
I started,
You're
my
writing
ego
like
started
this,
to
they're
say,
reading like
yeah,
this.
and now that you're going,
What's
he's
the first thing
gonna,
that happens to them?
he's gonna keep things out of your sight. He will not tell you.
This has never
And I say,
happened to you?
Yeah,
Pardon?
and now I'm feeling
Can't hear.
anger. And I told him, I
Right.
told him,
So
well,
they
now
misunderstand.
I'm thankful
That's the
that you
second
told
thing
me
that happens.
this, but now
The second
I'm
thing that
feeling
happens is
afraid
you interfere,
because
they do not
now
understand.
when I'm gone, you're not gonna
What's the
tell
first
me
thing that
things. And he said, no, it's just you don't understand. I didn't told you this before because
They're
I didn't
skipping stuff. I'm
trusted
going to put
you.
that in the
But
bucket
it
of
wasn't
stopping.
you, it was
They
me.
just stop.
It was me.
Either in little ways
in
or
fact,
big ways.
being
they stop.
afraid of everything
Right.
that I have
What's the
done,
first thing?
being guilty. So it wasn't you. Don't worry.
This has never
don't worry.
happened to
now
you?
I'm telling you
You've
this
never
because
tried to
now I
read
trust
something
you
which was
because
clearly
now I
not written in the way you're
understanding
trying to
my
read
own
it?
ego, and I was
I
like,
bet that in the
"Oh,
last week you've
So I
read
had to
you've read
rethink-
stuff
I
that
have
was
to
not
rethink
written
what
in
I
the
was
way you are
feeling, and I
seeking to
had
read
to
it.
really catch up
What's the first thing that
with
happens
myself
to you?
and say, this is not now. I mean, this is not
I'm
coming
gonna
from
put that in
this
a doesn't
moment. This is
understand
coming from
bucket.
the
See what I mean?
past. And
I
I
mean, I'm
started
being-
to dig in
Pardon me?
like in seconds in my mind, and I say, this fear comes from
The
this
first thing that
situation with
happens
that
is you
person,
slow
or that
down.
situation with that. Yeah,
And
there's some things
rereading
that I
is a
need to
version of
forget
slowing
about, forgive
down.
about.
You either
not
read more
knowing at
slowly
all.
the first time, or you have to
So,
read and reread and reread and reread.
So every
You
time that
slow
you see these
down.
kind of grievances in your life,
gonna
is
get back to why
probably
this
not
matters in a
something
minute.
from this moment,
Second,
this present.
you don't
it's just
understand.
things from the past.
Third,
from the past that needs to be
on.
forgiven. For example, when
You
Lee
get aggravated.
gets, in these
Then
moments of
you're done. Right? Done.
No. When
Now,
you feel
when this happens to you and you reread and reread, why
And
did you do that?
no,
Why didn't
I
you
don't
just
remember the
stop?
word. Well, you feel worried about that what you're doing is not enough, and what you're doing
That's exactly
is
right.
it
What do
seems
you
like
suppose
not
happens
working
if they don't
and things
need
like
to
that,
read it?
and he really feels like
They don't.
he's not doing it great, and
Problem
as a
is,
dad or
forgive me for
something,
saying this,
I can clearly see
you have
that's
no idea how
not
to
coming
handle
from
that
him. I
problem.
mean, that must be coming from
You really don't.
from a past
Why not?
experience of his life, or maybe his
How many
his
things have you written
past
in your life?
on
Imagine
his,
the number of
on his
imagine
mom
the
or his dad,
academic-y stuff.
and
Forget the
then
letters and all that kind of stuff.
some
Academic-y
conversation
stuff.
that he had
Order of
the other
magnitude.
day with his mom really
You know,
gave me that validation,
300?
because he is
300
not
texts,
he's
make it
really
up. 500?
full of
1,000? I don't
light
know
and
how many it
he's
is.
doing
Make it
great.
up. Make it
It's
up.
just
200.
that he takes
100. About 100.
this interaction
better with
with
100.
his kids like
You've written 100
too
academic texts in your life.
seriously in some form. So
Did the reader
he
stop
wants
reading
them
them?
to be happy, but he forgets that in order for them to
Did they?
feel happy, they need a dad.
No, why
they
not?
need a dad that is strong enough to make
They were
them
grading it. Let's be a little
go
more
through
crude about it. They were paid.
certain
Oh
well,
my God,
grades in
guys!
some form.
Academics get all
So-
freaked out when I talk about money.
So every time that I
said,
see him like
guys,
this,
I got news for
I
you.
always
Your
see
teachers
that's
read
not
your
him, that
stuff
is something that he's
because
holding
they
on
were paid
about
to what?
his past or
Were your
his family
teachers
past, because
reading
we
your
have
text?
always been raised
think about the
with
world?
our culture, within our
That's not what they're paid
cultures,
to
within
do.
our moms
Why
and
were
our
your teachers
dads'
reading your text?
belief systems,
Why were
and we
people
don't
paying
even
them to do it?
know sometimes
change the way they see
our
the world?
that our grievances
No,
doesn't
why?
even come from our own experience, but our dads or our moms. So that is why it's so important
Teachers
to review the content
read
of our
text
experience with our first two people in the world that showed
because they
us
are paid
that were
to care about the students.
mom and dad. So
You've learned to write in a
well,
system
I wanted to share
where
this
you're
because
writing to
these are
readers
another
who are
good
paid
examples of
to
how
care
we
about you.
always see shadows instead of
That
the
will
light. And it is true, light has come, and this is the way I have forgiven the world. And
The rules that you've learned
I
about
was
writing,
thinking yesterday
the
while I
rules
was
that were generated in the system
on the air,
where you are writing to somebody who's paid
my ego
to care about you.
kept saying me like, why aren't you crying?
over.
Why aren't you sad? You should be
In
sad.
the world beyond
You're
school,
living
call it the
better.
real world,
Why
but I'm
aren't
not
you
sure it's
sad?
real.
And I was really
It's just the
bored.
world beyond school.
And I was saying, no,
They're
but
not
why
paid to
will I
care
be
about
sad?
you.
She's really
Why are they
happy. I
reading?
get to see her during lunch and have lunch
are they
with
reading your
her,
stuff?
me in the
Why
airport,
will
and
they read
her,
it?
and
The
her,
journals?
and he, and her with her
The colleagues?
grandmas, and she was happy. She was really happy and okay. So there's no
Because they think it's
reason to feel
valuable
sad about anything
them.
that I'm doing, because I came in peace.
How much of student work is
I
valuable
got
to the
I have
faculty
the opportunity
to
to
which the
see
students are
my
writing?
ex-husband change his mind for the good. Even if he doesn't read the book, at least
And by the way, some
he
faculty who said to
showed
you,
me
"Oh,
the
your work was
content
so
of
bad,
his
thank you," they were
grievances,
lying.
and we could talk about it,
No,
and we
they were lying.
could
It
like
was
really
valuable to them,
state
but it was valuable to them
that our
because they
relationship
learned that
now is
people
a
misunderstood
relationship
things in
as a
ways they had
family,
no
not
idea
as a
people could
couple, and that is
misunderstand.
okay, and that he's gonna be the great dad that he
Faculty
is.
sometimes look at me and say,
I'm
"Oh, no,
gonna
Larry,
be
you're
the
wrong.
great
No,
mother that
student
I
writing is
am."
actually
It's just
professionally
in another
valuable."
kind
I say,
of,
then did you
communication
publish it?
System. But I will
That if you
be
didn't,
there
it's
for my daughter,
plagiarism.
and I am for my daughter. So there's
And
no
it's, well,
need
no, actually, it
to feel
wasn't
sad about it.
valuable.
And I haven't even
Look,
cried.
here's the problem you've
the
got.
tears that I thought that I would
your
cry
writing
when
needs
I
to be
when
clear,
I was
sure.
thinking
Your
of
writing
leaving,
needs to be
that I was
organized.
going to leave, and it's okay.
The rules
I'm
that govern
really
this are
happy. I'm
not what you
feeling
think they are. In
this,
fact, they're not rules.
Heavy weight
Yes,
in my
your writing
heart,
needs
in
to
my
be
heart, no longer
persuasive. This is
there.
way more important
I'm
than this,
feeling
but more
really
than anything else,
guided by
from now
God. All
on,
the
your
time has
writing
been
needs to be
really,
valuable.
a stronger validation.
Because if
on
it's not that, nothing
so
else matters.
As long as
It
I
makes
keep my
zero
mind
difference.
looking
Faculty come
up
into
to
my
God,
office,
looking up to light, looking up
and forgive me for the
to
drama,
the
but
really
in my office there's
the
two
essence
chairs.
that-
In the writing corner, I have a chair at my desk,
God
and then
is
there's
in
two chairs
everything,
over
so
here. There's
I
my
will
chair,
be
and then
okay.
there's the writer's
I will
chair.
be okay.
And next to the writer's chair
grievances can
is a box
be,
of Kleenex.
Reversed
And I'm
more
not kidding.
easily.
Because
But I
have
also
people coming
like
to me
how you
saying,
work through
"They're
your
not getting-
grievances with
they're
your
not accepting
ex.
my proposal.
You know, you
They're
really
not
did a lot
accepting
of
my draft."
communication,
I get faculty
and
who come in and
sometimes
say
more
they're not
communication is needed.
publishing my work.
And you saying,
And of course
you
there's
just brought
Kleenex there
that to my
because,
mind, that
careers
there's probably just
and,
some stuff I need to say. you know,
And
and yes,
sometimes it's
there
because it's
may
not
also
clear,
be
and
things
sometimes because it's not organized, and
that are
sometimes
popping up
because it's
from
not persuasive,
my
but
past that I need to
overwhelmingly
deal with, maybe do
it's
some
because it's not
writing
valuable.
to pull
And
out
the other
those
stuff doesn't
things.
matter. If it's
And it's
clear
funny
and
how, you know,
useless,
they'll sneak up on you,
it's
like you were
useless.
saying, you were in
It's organized
peace,
and useless, it's
and
useless.
sometimes things just pop
Persuasive and
up.
useless, it's useless.
And, you know, that's what happened to me
That's the
yesterday.
way
I
it is.
was in a basically good
Now,
mood. I was pretty
this
peaceful,
terrifies
and,
people because
you
they
know,
make the
he had
mistake.
prepared a meal
Fortunately, I'm
for
talking to
me. It
social
was very
scientists.
nice, and
Physical scientists don't have this
everything was fine.
mistake.
And then later on, when I left, I
They
had
think
these
value lies here.
things pop up, and
They think, oh my
Because
And
you know
God, what if my ideas
Tony?
just
Because
aren't
yes, it is
valuable?
about communication,
That's dopey.
but more than communication,
There's no
it's
such thing as value here.
doing it.
Value is here.
Kurt told me you don't notice it.
The question
You
is whether
change a
this
lot
particular community
since
of readers
A Course in
values it.
Miracles.
Which is
And
why it's so much about
gave
readers and not
he
about
gave
content.
Rebecca, my friend,
Can you
he gave
imagine writing a
some,
text
silver coin
which
that
one
he
group of readers
always
thinks
saved for
is terrifically
himself, like
useful and another group of readers thinks is
lucky
useless?
charm. And he
Well,
gifted
yeah.
that
I
to
got to tell you,
Rebecca in a moment
sometimes PhD
when-
students come
when
into
she
my
was
office
at
and
my
say,
house and
I really got to get
point.
this article published. I'm under so
And I
much
thought
pressure
it
to
was
publish. I got to
because of
publish.
something
And I
they
say,
were
okay, what
talking
journals
about
are
at
you
the moment,
going to
but
submit it
now
to?
he told me
And you look at me and
the
say,
weekend
what does that
that
matter?
He had give her that coin because he wanted to show some appreciation.
Because they think it needs to be
Because he
clear.
could really
It needs to be
see
organized. It needs to
that
be
with A Course
persuasive.
in
And those are just sort of
Miracles,
in the
I
thing
had
itself. Or anybody
changed
could look at
my
it
mood
and
around
decide
the
it's clear.
house and my
That's crazy
way of
wrong.
doing things
But most
around the house.
importantly
And
is
I didn't
valuable.
even notice it. It's just that
Value
I
lies in
stopped
readers, right?
fighting and
the
resisting
thing.
things and just going with
And so
the flow.
how
And
people can think about
even-
their writing without thinking about
even
readers
the things
is
that
probably
I mean,
the
we
biggest
do have
challenge you
conflict around the
face.
house in some
You've been trained to
points,
think
and
about
they
writing
were pretty,
formally,
hard
rule
moments,
governed.
that I did have
You have to
during
stop.
this,
And you have to think
last
about
month and
readers.
whatsoever. But
Not generic readers.
he really could
God help you if you
see
came up in a system with standardized tests
behavior.
where you had to write
And it's not that I
papers
changed,
for a
it's just that I
standardized
stopped
reader,
trying
like
to
on an AP
educate
test
him in some
or an
form.
SAT
I
test.
stopped to
That's disastrous
try
because
to
it
make him
specifically
see the
teaches
light.
you
I
not to think
just
about any
started to
differences between
unlock
readers.
my mind
We are going to be
to
talking
see
about
the light
differences between
myself
readers
in him. So I
and thinking
stopped
about those
feeling
differences.
mad about
That's what I
he
think
not seeing the light.
That's how writing actually works,
So
except in the bizarre
he-
world of standardized
he,
testing. So
he
I'm going
was
to
telling me
pass
that
these
it
out.
wasn't because of the words that I said to him, and because he
Okay,
could
turn to
clearly
the
see
first
that I
page.
have always
And here's what I want to
invited
do.
him to see the
Very
light
quickly, I want to
differently.
imagine that this is a group
But,
of,
With
by the way, any
Course in
biologists in the
Miracles,
group?
he understood
Wonderful, because
how
biologists have to leave.
that applied
No, this is a
into the behavior, because
test
now
about,
I
it has to do with
was
content, it has to do with
really not
biology,
trying
and I
to
don't want you to know anything about
talk
it.
him
Because I
through
want you to
it.
be
I was
responding
just
to the
showing him.
language, the writing of it.
So
You're
So here's what I'm going to
showing
ask you
your
to do.
life.
We're going to read two
Yeah.
imagined
Yeah, that's probably-
contenders for
that's
a
probably-
grant
so
or
he felt-
publication, and we're going to
he
decide which of
felt
these two
in
we're going to
some form-
publish.
He thanked
Okay?
he thanked me a lot.
I'm going to
this
read,
weekend.
you
He
stay
thanked
with me as
a
I
lot
read.
This weekend.
1A.
He didn't want me
As a
to go
consequence
with
of the
any
cost
kind
of sex, the
grievances,
theoretical
so
probability of
he really
clonal and
made an
sexual
effort
coexistence is
to
low. This
let
is
me
not
know that
sociology, this is
everything
biology.
was going to be okay.
As a consequence of the
And
cost
that
of sex, the
what we are
theoretical
doing
probability
is
in
part
clonal
our
clonal and
journey,
sexual coexistence
and
is
he
low.
in his
Observation
own
of coexistence
path,
in
and he's
vertebrate
trying to
taxa has been
find
reported.
his-
Within the frozen niche variation
a
model, the
partner
relevant
for
parameter
him,
is
but
difference in
he knows
overall
that he
niche
needs
breadth.
to do a lot of
A
work,
wider niche breadth for the
letting
sexuals and
go
for the clones is predicted in
his past
performances in
grievances on his
monocultures.
dad,
Performances in
because his
mixtures
dad
do not
was
indicate
pretty
such a
abusive to
relationship.
him.
Switching of
And
behaviors
his
or
mom
resource use patterns
wasn't
between
in a
mixed and
position
pure
to
cultures
defend
may be
him,
the
so he
cause.
was holding
Post-study
other
will
person
examine the
that he didn't
predictions of the
even knew
FNV
about
model.
that.
Okay, as again, I
he's
hope you
now
didn't understand
seeing
any
it
of that.
clearly
1B.
without
As a
even the
consequence of
help
the cost
any
of sex, the
therapies,
theoretical
he
probability of clonal and
is,
sexual coexistence is low.
he is now in
Nonetheless,
that part as
observation
well,
of
so
coexistence in vertebrate
I guess
taxa
it's
has
not
been widely
only a
reported.
matter
Within the
of
accepted model of frozen niche
communication, it's a
variation,
matter of
coexistence is
applying
explained
it,
by difference in
of
overall niche
really-
breadth. However, although the FNV
really do
model
it
correctly
first
predicts
for
wider niche
yourself,
breadth for the
and then
sexuals and
the
for the
others will
clones, its
see.
predictions are inconsistent with reported performances in mixtures. The proposed study will examine whether the
You know, I
anomaly may
will
be
think I'm
explained by the
doing
switching
it,
of
like I'll
behaviors or
think
resource use
I'm
patterns between mixed and pure
showing
cultures.
it,
Which of these we're
and
going to be more
then I'm
likely to
thinking, well, I
fund?
must not be because
Second one, of
there's
course,
still
why?
things
tell
that
me
aren't
why.
happening that I'm still in ego about some things. Like I need to see him do,
Okay.
X, Y, Z.
I'm gonna be
So
really
I
big on
guess I need to
particular
explore
words.
that within
Right?
myself and just continue on the path
Important.
and see what
Right?
that is
First
as it
thing you
comes
said.
up.
Now,
And it's so frustrating because
imagine
I'll
if
think,
you're the writer
oh,
of 1A,
I've, quote,
and we said to
arrived, so
her,
to speak, or
your
things
work
should
doesn't
be
seem important.
really, really,
What's her
happy and
likely
just right
response?
and then it's something within me
You obviously
that seems to
didn't
be
understand.
holding that back for some
And we
reason.
said, all right,
So,
fix it.
yeah.
Make it better. What is, this is crucial. What is that writer likely to do? If we said, we didn't, it's not important, and the writer thinks you didn't understand it, they're about to make a gigantic mistake, because they would do what?
To fix someone else's.
What do you do when somebody says to you, I don't understand?
No, I get that. It's
You
just,
explain.
And like even whenever you don't
yeah, no, I get that totally. And I thought I was showing my light and not focused on the other person. But
You think I care?
when you
it'll show up as like
Why do I
feelings.
not want you to
It'll
explain?
show
And
up
by the
as
way, why did your
feelings
teachers
that
want you to
something's not
explain?
right. Do you know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
Why did your teachers want you to explain stuff?
Yeah.
if you can show your light,
Because
what
they
that
wanted to
allows
know
the
whether
other
you
person, instead
understood.
of saying that there's something
You guys
wrong
don't
with
know
them,
how to explain stuff.
that light
You explain
can
stuff under the
shine
model of
on that other
demonstrating to somebody
person,
that you
and that person
understand it.
then
That's how
can,
you've learned to explain. You
because
don't even
now
know you
they're,
know that you've done this.
in
You
the
have
light,
learned that
they
what
can
explaining
perhaps
is,
look at
it's
their
revealing
own,
to the world the inside of your head.
darkness and start
No one
removing that.
cares
Otherwise they
about
can
the
do some
inside of your head.
introspection, as opposed to
At
being
least
told that
not
there's
unless you
something
pay us.
wrong with them,
If you
that they
pay
need
us
to
to
get
care,
fixed, they need
we'll
to
care.
correct themselves,
Right?
and that
But in the real world,
automatically
you're going to
sends our
stop paying your readers
egos
to
into
care
a
about the
defense
inside of your
mode
head.
and
Here's a
starts
shot.
perceiving that
think
light that
writing
you're trying to shine on them
is
as an
conveying your
attack,
ideas.
saying that there's something inherently wrong with them that puts them
Let me
on
say
the
that again.
defensive,
You
and
think
has
writing
negative
Yeah.
is
consequences instead of the
communicating
positive that
your
you're
ideas
hoping.
to your readers.
I know what you're saying.
It
Maybe
is
I'll give you
not.
guys a practical example.
Well,
It's like
professional
I'm
writing. Professional
a
writing.
super affectionate
It
person.
isn't.
Like I like kissing and holding
It's
hands.
not
I'm like
conveying
huggy,
your
huggy, kissy,
ideas
kissy.
to
And
your
he's
readers.
not. He's like more, I don't want to get too,
It's
you know,
changing
but
their
he's a very
ideas.
passionate man. He's very passionate.
Nobody cares what ideas you have.
You know, once we go private, he's very passionate. But outside of that arena, which I love that about
This is
him.
way more radical than it
He's
sounds.
also very kind. He's
I used to make the
very
mistake of saying
generous
to
with
students
me.
who came in, I teach arguing a
So
lot.
there's a part
And I
of
say
me
to
as a
students who make an
woman
argument, why do you think that?
that,
And then I realized this is a horrible
like
question.
I used to point fingers
It's a
at
teacherly
him
question.
for
The teacher
not
says,
being
why do you think that? Because the teacher
like
wants to know what.
showing me love
in his
that way.
head.
Like I guess that's my love
I
language.
said, oh my God,
part
I'm
of
doing the
it.
same thing. So now I don't say to him, why do you
And I
think that?
think when we
I
were
say
together in the
now,
past, and
why
if
should
I
I
would
think
point that out, he would feel attacked, or like it was, you know, a
And guess what?
grievance of mine.
That doesn't
So
work.
in trying to stay in that
Right?
space
Which is
of
interesting why it doesn't work in academia.
just
Why doesn't
loving
it work
him the
in
way
academia?
I love
Why doesn't that work?
and being that
A
light,
professional. This is a great
there's a
question.
part of me that
Why is
feels
it
a little bit
that I
of
don't say, okay,
rejection and
you
a
think
little bit
nothing?
of hurt.
Why does that not work? And I
So
mean, this is not supposed to work.
it's like a quiet
sometimes it
grievance, if you
Why
know
is it
what I
not supposed to
mean.
work
Like,
in an academic realm?
you know, wow, you know, I wish he would, you know, do X,
Because
Y,
what?
Z in this moment, where
Well,
he's there for
that's
me for
probably
sure, and
why
I
it
know he
does
loves
work.
me.
That's not why it's
So
supposed to work.
it's so subtle, and I'm just working
Because
through
there's
that.
a rule
And
of
I don't
Western
know how to deal
academia.
with it really. I mean, I have
It's rule that's
I've
of
talked
course
about it
broken in the
before,
breach a
and I
million
remember I went
times.
to Holy
The
Spirit
rule
about,
says nothing
you know,
will
him just
be
kissing me, and he
accepted
did.
as
It was so
knowledge
funny.
or
Like the
understanding
next day
until
or
it has
2
been
days later,
challenged
he
by
like
someone
he
competent to
kept
challenge
kissing
it.
me. So I guess that you're right. I just
That's
have
the
to
rule.
keep going back to that,
This is very
to
important
God, and
because it changes your readers.
just holding my
Look,
light. You know, just keep holding my
teachers
candle,
read
and
because
he'll
they're paid to
feel
care
it
about
and
writers.
respond to it.
Some
As
readers
a
in the world, in
response,
many cases, read to find
instead
out
of
information they need. If you go to
you know,
somebody on
me
the quad and
verbally
say, excuse
saying,
me,
why
if
don't
somebody
you do
stops you
this,
on the
this,
quad
that,
and
and the
says,
other?
excuse
You're not
me,
affectionate enough.
can you tell me how to get to the library?
So that's where I'm
And
at
you say,
specifically.
okay, yeah, go over there and turn right and go up there.
You know what? I feel
They
like
don't
that's
say,
where the habit
well, I
is
doubt that.
coming in because of an old
Because
memory.
they're not.
that
They
you
don't,
might not
as
even realize.
readers,
I'm
have the
not trying to
function
put words in your mouth,
challenging
but as I listen, this is why
But at least
I like
in theory
hypnosis,
and in a lot
because
of practice,
there's these
your
old,
readers are
old,
different from those readers on the quad, and they're
these
way
have been
different from
woven into
teachers.
all of the whole,
Your readers
all of our
have the
memories.
professional
And so, like when
function of
when
challenging what you say.
things come up and we say, "Darn, I should have known better."
So
I know
explaining
this already. How
turns
come it's
out
not
only to happen
penetrating? Well, the reason
inside
is
of these
I
two
feel
functions.
it's because of a
You
habit.
only
So
explain
we seem to have to work
inside
hard and
value
awareness
having been
to keep
generated,
remembering.
and persuasion
But
having begun.
The thing
It is an
about
enormous
that
mistake
that's
of
beautiful about
PhD level writers that they try to
just
explain
being
first.
still. Okay, that whole thing.
And I
be
know why
still
you try
and
to
know that I
explain first,
am.
because in school they just wanted you to
That's a
explain
lot
first,
deeper. That's
because the whole
like the
thing was just about
meditation,
seeing
the
what you know.
hypnosis, the visualization.
Start
That's
explaining.
like the,
Line one,
well,
classic thing.
visualization I
Begin
don't
with the
know about.
definition.
But
Teachers love this. Begin with the definition.
Deeper
Because it tells the
that we
teachers
can
that you, what?
go, the stiller we
You know
can
the
be,
definition.
the more
Don't begin with definition, guys.
submissive to the truth.
So, back
more
to B.
suggestive, and that's why I like the hypnosis.
How are you going to make it important?
Or meditation.
How do you
things
make it
like
important?
that. But I'm thinking about the things
Now,
that
the
Tom
second word you
says
said.
always are like, whoa. I mean, everybody says, whoa.
Oh, no, that's a
believe
terrible
me.
word.
But he's got this, of course, we
Do me
all
a favor.
know this
Do me
way
a favor.
to
Take the word new.
bring
Or
things
worse, original.
To the truth that seems
Is
so
the Holy
Do you think that
entangled.
you're here to do new and original?
Yeah, yeah.
If you would find the
And,
synapse in your
and
brain that
actually,
is storing those words,
I'm,
kill it. No.
I'm
And
thinking
people say to me,
that
"Oh, does
I
that mean
should
I'm here to do
ask
non-original
Tom
work?" No.
a question about whether
You're not
he
here to
would
do original
like
work.
to
You're here to
help
do
me make
valuable work.
some certain.
What's the difference?
I like his
You
words
think
should
you're
be
here
done.
to create new
They should be
knowledge?
put into
Well,
without
you know
any
how hard it is to
negativity
create new
that
knowledge?
we
We can
sometimes
create new
will
knowledge
bring
in the next
we
30
should
seconds.
be putting them
All you have to
into
do is count up the number of people
those
who are in this room.
really
Because
these-
nobody in the
those
world knows
still
how many people are
moments.
in this room.
And I think that we would drop a
No
lot
one
of
knows.
our old stuff.
And we will
because what
create
happens
new
is
knowledge right
we
now. We'll
don't-
just count the
it
people in this
doesn't
room. We'll say,
really,
okay, now we know.
negate the
Is anybody
old
gonna read
stuff.
that
What it does
paper?
is it squeezes the old
Why
stuff
not?
out. Because this
They're going to
becomes
say, who
primary
cares how
path
many people
then,
are in that room?
where our old paths
Dear friend of mine, when
that
I was a
keep
PhD
arising,
student
they've
here,
been woven for so many
discovered
years that they're going to keep
journals written by a
arising.
woman
Anyway,
in the
that's
late part
just
of
my
the
thought.
19th century
These are like old
in England.
habits that
She traveled around
that
the
die
world, and
hard.
every year she wrote a journal.
And even
Somehow
though we know the
they
truth.
ended up in a library
So
in Norwich.
anyway,
And she was
yeah.
over in Norwich one day, and she
I'll be back
stumbled into a
channeling
back
Tom.
room, and there's all these journals with tons of dust on them. She blew off the
Hey,
dust,
good
and she said,
morning.
"Oh my gosh, it's
Good
amazing.
morning,
This woman
Tamara.
traveled the world for 30 years and wrote a journal every time she traveled."
I just the
Came
way
back
that
here,
I,
wrote up a grant, and said,
you know,
"Whoa,
obviously,
I want to
I
spend
think I
3 months
don't have
studying
all
this."
the
And then she got her money,
understanding
and she
of
went
this
over to
and
Norwich, and
everything,
she spent 3 months, and
the
she
way
read
that
the whole
I've been
thing, and she wrote
sort
it
of
all up, and she
thinking
handed it
about
to her
it
committee, and in
over
an
the
hour and a
past
half, they
years
sent it back,
is,
and they said, "You got to be kidding."
I don't think we can negate.
She said, "Well, I'm going to get my dissertation. I'm going to get a degree now, right?" They said, "You got to be kidding. Of course we're not going to give you your
allow
PhD."
them
And she
and
said,
forgive them.
but nobody in the world knew what this woman said."
and love
Right,
them.
they said.
You know?
And we still wish we didn't know
And
what she said. Because
yeah,
we do
I think
not
in like
care.
in some spiritual
And she said,
conversations,
it's
let's
original
say,
research.
they call this sort of
She said, "I guarantee you it's new."
attempt to like
And they said, "That's right."
spiritualize our
and it's original.
like they call it a spiritual bypass,
is
you know,
not
where you're
knowledge.
just trying to like pretend you don't need
And she said,
something that you
"That's
need
ridiculous. It has to
and
be knowledge."
spiritually
No, it's not ridiculous.
kind of erase your need in a certain way.
She was
rather
living
than
in a
just sort of
positivistic
fully
world
accept
where knowledge
yourself
looks like
as you
this.
are, because you're divine.
In a positivistic
already,
world,
You know,
knowledge
mean,
is just built up over
Janine, what you
time.
express, it
And
sounds
any
to me
time
like
you
have a
find out
really
something that
simple
people
need
didn't know,
for a
you
little
get to
bit
just
more
add up to
affection.
this model,
And
and knowledge just keeps on growing,
that
and everybody's
could be
happy.
a conversation.
And that is dead.
And there's nothing, and you're judging yourself for it. And
Here's the model now.
it's just a personality need. It's not. It
Right, these
doesn't
are
make you
people.
any less divine, and it doesn't make you any less spiritual, and
human
it doesn't
beings.
make you any less
There are conversations
the
moving through time.
Holy Spirit or
And
aware.
there's a bunch of
that
people,
everything
and they
is
get to say what knowledge
consciousness. You can have all that
horrified.
and still
why would those people get to say?
have a
Why did they
personality
get to say?
need and love it, and
Especially
I don't know.
because
Does that
historically,
make
of
any
course,
sense?
Yes,
they've
it
looked
makes
just like
sense
me.
because it's the way we learn how to balance
As
lackness
my
concept.
niece says to me
Because
every
when
time she sees me,
you are born in
male,
this world
too
and
pale,
you're
too
experiencing
stale.
the level of the form, you're experiencing duality.
why on earth
But in order
would
for
these
you to
people
feel at
get to
peace,
say what
you
knowledge
need
is?
balance. So whatever you feel you were
I get it. Big
not
problem.
given by your
do.
mom or your dad,
That's a
that are your first experience with a source,
people
with
get
a
to say,
concept of a source,
What counts?
whatever you
as
feel
knowledge?
they didn't
The
give
good
you
news is,
when
they
you
are
were a
changing.
child, you will compensate it
way too long, way too late.
with your personality
Way too slow.
traits.
But they're
So, for
changing.
example,
The point is,
what I
that's the way
have
it
learned
works.
from myself
You may
is
not
that
like it, that's the way it
I
works.
was really mad
get
at
to say.
men because I didn't have a father.
No, they get to say,
But
yep,
that
You're
made
right.
me
That was
really
new. I didn't know how
strong
many
women,
people were in
a very
302,
independent women,
but it doesn't count as knowledge.
like
It doesn't have any value to us.
I mean, I did have always this kind of
The good news is this thing just does move
leadership,
through
a
time.
kind of
The other good news
personality
is
that
this boundary is
gave me
permeable.
opportunities in life that I could ever have
Stuff
without
comes in,
that part of me
and
being,
unlike this model,
being like that,
stuff goes out.
because I didn't have any college
I like to think
degree
of
or
academic
anything, but I did
conversations as
reach
sort of excreting as they go.
so much
Stuff gets left
better
behind. It's not like this.
things in life
Where
because of
everything
those skills.
gets
So
added up is always
it
there
makes
forever.
sense, and
not the way
I
it works.
agree with you that
They go along for a
every
while, they think
resistance
things
that
for a
you
while, and then
have
they say,
about your
"Whoop, that was dumb.
personality is denying
Don't think that
your
anymore.
learning
They go along
process.
for a while and they say,
so
"Whoa, we were
the
doing
lesson
that.
will repeat
Don't do
itself
that
again
anymore."
if
It's
you
not this
just don't
build-up
go
model.
through that
This
kind
build-up model
of
assumed that everything was right. We don't
observation of
think
your
that. We think a lot of what we think
patterns
right
in
now is
life
wrong.
and how
We just
to
don't know what the
really
wrong is.
acknowledge
And
the
we don't know what better
lackness
is.
that you thought
We
that
wanna
you
know.
had
We do.
in order for you to
We wanna get
change
better
your
at it.
behavior. Or it isn't about
But in order
change your
for us to
behavior,
do
it's
that,
just
you have
acknowledging
to be
that
dealing
you are
with the
perfect,
stuff
completely, and
we
whole
say
and
is
whole and
knowledge.
holy, and you're just remembering, or the
might
progress
not
that
feel
always
good.
Bob talks about,
That's how
that
it
it's
works.
not being perfect.
So,
I mean, you're not
important isn't
making
gonna do it.
progress to be perfect. Is to
New
remember
isn't
that
gonna
you
do it.
are already perfect.
Original isn't going to do it.
So,
Because I talk to people and they say, people
I
don't
do
think
agree
this is a
with
guy, they're not
everything that
publishing
you
it.
said, Tamara,
Well,
and
somebody
it
says they
makes
don't think
sense
it's
to me. I don't
important.
know
So you know
if
what
for
they do?
everybody, but
They
it
say,
makes sense to me.
this
The 12
important
steps to
study.
say progress, not perfection.
Yeah, that was very helpful, Tamara. Thank you. And I
What
am
is it
kind
about
of,
B that makes it
I
feel
do
important?
feel that it's just kind of me, like my
What is it?
little
Tell me the
personality
words
stamp. There's
on the
nothing
page.
wrong with it exactly to be that way. And just acknowledging it and loving that in myself.
Here's what I
And
literally
accepting
want you to
that,
do.
and
I want you to
and
literally,
he's got
everybody in
his
the
own
room, I want you to
personality
literally go
traits and
through
his
1B
behaviors
and circle the
patterns.
words,
So,
the specific words
and I guess the
that are
practice
making it
is,
valuable to the audience, to the readers.
seeing each other
What's the first
or
verb you
each
see?
other as
A word,
whole,
not verb. What's the first word you
perfect and
see
complete, that
that
we
makes
really
it
don't need changing,
valuable?
but we can
Nonetheless.
communicate
Next.
to adjust to each other within a relationship.
Accept
Because it's
it is,
always
but
going to be
actually
that. It's always going to be
widely.
something, like,
Accept it.
really things like
Next.
he's messy, I'm neat, that kind of stuff
However,
comes up for people.
next.
And,
Although,
like I think
although,
Lee some time ago put him about
Next.
washing the dishes, where he was always washing the dishes and nobody would wash the
Inconsistent.
dishes. And,
Next.
you leave the person because they're not neat and clean.
Reported.
It could always be, it's always going to be something.
Next.
I feel
Anomaly.
that
Here's my
your
first
ego
piece of
wants to
advice to you that you can
fine-tune.
do to make your writing better starting
It could
this
be almost
afternoon.
anything.
Spend 15 minutes
But yeah,
a week
thank you, Tamara. I
for
appreciate
the rest
that.
of this year, taking articles in your field, print them out so you have a hard copy, go
I feel
through
like the
and
only
circle
thing,
every word
that
in the
I
writing that is
warn
creating
myself
value
against
to
is
the
having an
readers.
expectation
If you
of
see an
someone to
article
fulfill,
that you think doesn't have any of those words, send it to me.
a need.
I'll give you my
And
email. Send me
it's
your email
not
and say,
that
Larry, I found an article
I
that
can't
doesn't
have
do
the
it.
talk,
Here's what I bet.
and they can't say,
You will
oh,
see none.
wow,
I will see
didn't
10.
realize that you needed that. Maybe that would
Well,
make
10's 5.
a difference.
I guarantee you 5. Likely.
But I just get
What's going on?
I had
How come you don't
had
see
so
them and
much
I see 5 or 10?
expectation of people in the past
You missed them
that
here.
that really brought me into
I see
a
'em.
very
I know the code.
a lot of suffering. And
Every
so that's
community
all I warn
has its own
myself
codes.
against when
The
I
communities you're
think that,
entering have their
you
own
know,
codes.
maybe
A
someone
set of
would
words
do something
that
for me
communicates value.
that I want.
You must
You
know
know,
the codes
'cause
of
I
the
have
communities you're working
a
in,
tendency
and they
to
are
be who I
particular to
am,
communities.
and,
Some codes are shared among a bunch of
I've had
communities,
people
some aren't.
ask me to do
You've got to
certain
know.
things, and I'd be like, okay,
No.
but then
You spend 15
it's a
minutes a
habit.
week for the rest of this
Again,
year,
it's
you'll be
interwoven
doing 2
sometimes so
things. One,
deep.
you'll be training yourself
just
to
keeps
look for the
happening,
code
and then
of
it's like
creating value. The other thing you'll be
I've
doing, if you're
disappointed
smart,
them, and I
is
don't
you'll be
care
writing
for
down each of those
disappointing
words,
someone
and you'll
either.
be creating
As much
an
as I don't
invaluable
want to
word
be,
list.
I don't want to disappoint them either.
So that when it's a
So
week before something is done
it's,
and you're
kind
doing
of a
one of
matter
your
of
revisions,
accepting
you're going to do what? You're going to do the
and
same thing
giving
on your own
myself my
work.
needs and
And if you can't
accepting
underline 10
and
words in the
seeing
first 2
beauty,
paragraphs, you're going to do what? You're going to go to the word
things that I
list
really
and you're going to jump them
enjoy
in.
about that person, and
Right.
more focus more on
Sometimes
you
it's
know
that simple.
seeing that more.
Sometimes we take articles
And
that
I don't
wouldn't
know.
get
I
published
could
in
be
an
wrong
hour.
too,
We
but
do
I
things and they
just
get published.
don't want to be in that
Sometimes
position.
weeks.
Well,
I'm not
you would
suggesting
think
this is
though
always
that
magic,
affection is
but
mutually
sometimes it's magic.
beneficial.
sometimes
But
the
I
problem
guess
with
it's
the
still
simple.
where the one person just
The
doesn't
problems
perceive that that's all that
have to do
important,
with these people.
which is kind of different
You have to
from
know
expecting them to
them.
pick up their socks kind of
As I
thing.
say to
You know what I mean?
undergraduates who look at me and they
Which
say,
is
why
more
does it take
practical
6 years or
issue.
5
It's
years
not
or
a
even 4 years to
sharing
get a
issue
PhD? Aren't they just learning
to
more stuff?
me, and
No.
that could have to
Half
do
their
with
time is
that
spent learning
person's
more stuff. The
background
other half is learning their readers.
of just not maybe their
I will
parents
say
weren't
this
that
again.
affectionate
If you
toward
do not
them,
know your
or
readers, the
it's not
particular
something they
people in
perceive
a
that they
community,
need. So I don't even know how to think about that because it's something that's so natural for me. You know what I'm saying? So
if you do
I
not
know what
know
you're
these
saying.
people,
yeah.
My
you're very
mom, my
unlikely to
mom, one
create
time I
value,
grabbed her hand
and
in
you
the
are
store
very
and she goes,
unlikely to
"Don't
be
do that.
persuasive.
People will think we're lesbians."
Because
So this is
persuasion
what I,
depends
this is
Oh
what
my
I
on what
goodness.
experienced.
they
Yeah,
doubt.
that's what I
You
experienced.
don't know
My
what they
mom
Yeah.
doubt? How on earth are
was
you going
not
to overcome that
affectionate
doubt?
at all,
You
and
must know them.
her mother was like
It's not enough to know your
was
subject
like
matter.
English.
You got to know your readers.
Not to offend anybody, but there's a lot
Okay,
of
so what is it
there's
about?
less affection
There's two
there
things
from
going
her
on here
mother
then.
too. And
One
I
of
don't
them
know if
has to
that's
go
why,
on
but
with the community
maybe
of
I'm
readers.
stereotyping, but yeah.
Tell me the
can
words
see
you
you
underline
broke
that has to do
pattern.
with the
Good
community.
job, Andy.
Well,
Of the words you underline in
did
B.
I don't need a lot
Which
of
words have to do with the
affection.
community?
Oh,
Widely
yeah, she is. Well, you know
accepted,
what? The funny part about Deborah is that I
reported.
tried to get her to sit
Those
on my
are
lap
words that
and
cued
to,
that
you
there
know,
was a
and all the
community of
time,
people
and
who
she didn't
want to
ever want to. It
understand
was like,
this.
geez, she does not want to ever be.
You
No,
don't
she
have those
says she's
words?
too busy, and she
You're
is,
not
and she
signaling
still
any
is. She's so
community.
busy. Well, she has time for me, believe
What do
me.
the other words
But
do?
but not that
Nonetheless,
affectionate physical
however,
stuff either.
although,
No,
what do they
no,
do?
I don't think we broke that. Although she can give her kisses and hugs, I don't think it's super comfortable for her.
They
You
do.
love your granddaughter.
Guess we'd have to ask her.
I
What's
had a
that?
British
And
grandmother.
find the
I can
synapse in
vouch
your
for
head
the non-affection.
that has that
You
word.
see, I think so too. Yeah, I
But
think it just went down
I
the
think
line.
Here's what's
I
going
think
on.
this is where that attachment
He has
theory
been
stuff
told or
comes in,
taught or
which is
learned
it's all at the level of personality, but
that in
it's
order to
really,
have
really useful.
persuasive,
And
clear, organized
it's funny
prose,
because I've been
you had to
sort
have
of
what
in
are
this
sometimes
Course in
called
Miracles
flow
thing and
words
thinking about some
or are
new thought
sometimes
lately,
called transition
like
words.
that,
Words like because
early
and
20th
if
century sort of
and
psychological,
unless
everything's
and
cosmic mind.
however
And I've been
and
Andy got me into
although
it. I've been listening to all these
and
books on
and
YouTube.
and but.
Interestingly, in the
Right?
class that I'm
Are those words
doing,
bad? Those words aren't bad. It's
we
bad
had
to have, is it
a
bad to
week
have
on
flow?
the new
It's not
thought,
bad to
because
have
I'm in
flow.
the study of religion,
They have
so
nothing to do with
kind of
value.
cover this kind of stuff. But
Fine. What's the difference between
that is like
and but
we all share
in creating value?
subconscious mind. There's like only one subconscious mind that we're all sort of picking out of. But that aside,
Imagine if you go to your readers and say, "Hey readers, hey community." Hey community.
This is what I'm learning because of from the attachment
I've read your
theory
stuff.
perspective.
I've thought about what you think.
Home
And
I
have something to
a lot
say.
of relational trauma, attachment trauma, which
Hey
created
readers,
a lot of
I've
that.
read your stuff.
And not the same thing, but
I
like
know
a lot
what you
of,
think.
confusion
But
around expectations and
you're
relationships
wrong.
and how to relate just to people on a daily level, kind of thing.
Which one are they going to pay attention to?
And what I'm learning through the work that I'm doing, which just helps me sort through this personality stuff so that it helps me be able
Here's what I will say. And if somebody wants to do it right now,
myself when I have
you can name a journal.
Sort of like
we will go to every
operational
edition of that journal in the last 20
in
years.
the world like
and
this. These are like
every paper
relational,
will say
operational skills that I'm working on. And
everyone.
a lot of that can just be a conversation.
No, he just wait. What's
at
the
that
difference?
practical level,
He says, and and I understand it. I can't
it
go to
creates
these
more
editors and say they're
challenges.
wrong.
Let's just say, from my perspective, for me
And
to
I am
think
telling
that
you
someone's going to read
that
my mind
every
and do what
article
I
published in that
need,
journal in the last 20
than
years
it does for
is
me
opened
to
by
express
saying
my need
readers are
and
wrong.
then in a relationship
They're looking at me
understand
like, I don't
that
believe it.
sometimes people need to hear it a few times
What's
before
the
they
difference?
really get it, before it becomes a habit for them, or that we can negotiate around certain needs. And let's say I need more affection, so can you,
Yeah.
when
One way to
this
put it
happens,
is,
can you say this kind of thing, or
you have to
respond
know the
this way,
code.
or hold my hand here, or this kinds of thing.
You have to know
And
the
then
code.
give the other person a
If you
chance
say to the
okay,
people
well,
who are
this
the
is what I
dominant
need.
figures in your field,
Can you do
you know what?
this? And that's
I've read all your stuff.
what I'm learning
and
through the
you're
work that
idiots.
I've been doing on that level is like, that's what a
Not gonna go
relationship
well.
is. Like, we can support each other
say that.
in
What did
our
you say to them?
needs, but all of
the dominant
this is
figures in the
the
field.
work of a relationship and negotiating and stuff. And it's not
I say,
a bad thing to want stuff.
what do you say to them?
It's not a bad thing when someone doesn't.
Yeah, but if you want to learn the
automatically know
code,
what you
what do you suppose the code
And-
is?
want. All of those are negotiable.
Yeah, but the code is, wow,
what
are
I've
you
been learning.
smart?
Good morning.
Wow.
Good morning, Bill.
I'm just amazed.
Welcome to.
You are
I think
so
you just
smart,
arrived
and
in the
you've
United States.
contributed, and
Yes,
you've
you're
advanced
welcome
this.
to the United States.
You've advanced this
being
community
here with
through
Lee.
in fabulous ways.
I heard a little bit of discussion around Janine's question, where the idea of at least conceptually of whether or not there might be.
What do you think we have wrong? And then you better have an argument,
Brought up something
not
that was
an
sort of
explanation.
in the
Do
realm
not
of
explain. Argue. You're talking to
denying
people who,
feelings
wrote
or
this
something
stuff.
like that, and so
You don't have to explain it to them.
that may not be
You
the
have
word
to
she
predict
used,
what they're going
but
to
I
doubt when you say
I did
they're
a
wrong.
quick look.
So you
Just
say to them,
wanting, just
you're wrong
wanting
about
more
this.
affection from
And
my
they say,
partner.
Yeah, no, I'm clear on
Which I
that,
agree
but
that
I
I'm
think
wrong.
there was sort of
You
some
say, well, who's
peripheral
wrong?
discussion that came up around
That's what
that as
introductions
people
do.
were
Yes.
sort of giving
They
you
give a
their
quick version
thoughts.
Yep.
of why these
And
people should
and
think
so
they're wrong.
I pulled up some from the
And they
text
say, well, okay.
in the course where it
Preliminarily,
says,
I've read your first 2
true
pages.
denial
Now I'll start reading
is a
the rest.
powerful protective
Why?
device.
Because
You
you
can
cause
and
them to
should
think that your work
deny
might
any
be valuable.
belief that error.
Imagine if
can
you go to
hurt
them
you.
and say,
This
wow,
kind
your work
of
has been really
denial
great,
is
and now
not
here's
a
something new
concealment,
that you
but a
didn't know.
correction. Your
See, here's what
right
happens.
mind depends
People say to
on it.
me, man, if
And so
I
the way
say
that
that they've done
I
something wrong,
hear
I'm taking
that
a huge risk.
goes
True.
to
You
sort of the
think you're not
concept
taking a risk if you
of
do this?
we
What's the risk
exist
you
in
run if you do
this
this?
human
Hey, really
earthly
smart
realm
people, I've done all your work, I've
with the
studied all your
split
stuff,
mind
and I have
that the
something I want
Course
to add.
shows to us over and over, the, if you will,
No, that's
in the
actually a
very
really good
simplistic
risk.
terms,
Right?
the
What's the risk
egoic
you run there
mind and
when you say there's
and
something I
the
want
right
to add?
mind, or our highest self, Holy Spirit mind, if you will,
Or
the Christ
worse,
mind. And
I'd
so
like to put my
I
voice into the
think
conversation.
what the text is pointing to
Say, we don't have any
is
reason to
that
listen to it.
on the one hand, the issue
Pause on that
in
one
and
for a
of
minute.
itself, with no other considerations of your want, your desire, your
The
preference
University of Chicago writing
for
program
more
is not real
affection,
popular in the
is,
world of writing
without
programs.
diminishing it, this is not a
And you can
criticism,
see
it's
why.
just examining it. That's more
A lot
of
of people
in
think
the
we're
egoic
fascists.
realm of, in terms of, as
I
the
don't
human
dispute.
being that you are,
Here's
that
what
we
we teach
all
people
are,
to do.
that's your
We say,
preference.
identify the
And
people
so
with power
the Course is
in your
pointing us in
community
the direction
and
of
give them what they want.
separating out your human
That's what we
egoic
teach people to do.
preference and
Lots of people have said
pointing
to us in some
towards
version or another,
the
you're
truth at the
supposed
highest
to
self.
teach people
So it
to
says, it seems to be saying on the
challenge
one hand,
the existing
it's
community. Oh, actually,
fine
I just
to
did.
deny the
Right?
idea that
Notice
your,
that I did it inside
forgive
the
me, I forget
terms
it, your
of the
husband, your
community.
boyfriend
People
is
say, why don't you
is
teach people to
denying
have their
you
own
love
individual
in any way
voice?
because I
I'm gonna
can't,
say,
he can't,
I get
nobody
that
can
argument.
deny
I get
you
the
love.
moral and ethical
That's not
pressure
possible.
to teach
But
people
on
to
the
have
other
their
hand, in
individual
the
voices.
egoic realm, the other side of
But when I
the
sit with
split
somebody up in
mind
my
that
office
we all
who's worried
mostly
about their
operate
career
from
not
as
going anywhere,
humans, that you
it
have,
can't be about
you
their
know, a
individual
preference,
voice.
whether it's
It's
picking up
about
the
what's going
socks
to
or
make
more
it valuable
affection.
to their readers.
And so maybe it's
You
helpful
need to
for you
understand that this
to
program that we
look at it
have is
and say,
motivated
okay, on the
by
one
those
hand,
people
I have
who
an
have come to us
egoic
and said our writing
form,
is not
preferential
succeeding,
set of
and the whole
preferences that
program
I
is
can
aimed
work
at
from,
them. How
but
do you make them, help
the
them
entire
succeed?
time that you're
There's a
aware of
ton of
that and
ethical
playing
issues
that human
in
game,
that.
if you will,
You don't really care. I just want to
that
put them
you
out there.
don't lose
There's
track
also the
of that. At
personal
no point in
at-risk
time
issue.
is love
You
ever
want me to go
denied
to
for
this
me.
really important
That
person,
I
the
have the
editors of this
full
journal, and
weight
tell them
and
they're wrong.
force and
Yeah, you do.
enormity of
You need
all
to
the
do it
love
under the
that
code.
ever was and
You
ever
want to do
would
it under
be.
the code.
That's my
There's
dog, by the
polite
way.
ways to do it. There's
Hi, dog.
insulting ways to do it.
So I don't
You
know
need
if I
to learn
complicated
how
that
they
or if
do
that's
it
helpful,
in that
but
community.
that's the way that
You
I
don't do it in the way
look
they
for
code it.
practical applications
You're gonna get
as per the
sucked
Course.
That sounded pretty good to
What if
me,
you
Bill.
don't do it at
Yes,
all?
that's
Yeah.
definitely it. I've definitely
You're gonna get
addressed it
rejected.
from the egoic mind as a
So,
want from
all right.
that split part of myself.
Sorry for the
And,
drama. Oh my
you
gosh,
know,
especially
knowing,
because
no,
we're on
I don't
page
need
1
it
of
because
a
I am
30-page
love.
handout.
I am love.
All right. Page
And
2. Page
so yeah,
3.
but
Sorry,
that's helpful.
technically
And yes,
we were
my
on page
boyfriend,
2
and
because there was no
not
page 1.
husband yet, but
Let me just show you a couple of things
See?
quickly from this
He
top
doesn't
two
know. He
paragraphs.
doesn't know. He
The
is,
top
but he
paragraph,
doesn't
why
know.
people write essays.
Yeah, I mean, I think if it was me, the
This is a
egoic
caricature,
Bill
I admit.
would,
This is a caricature.
you know,
It's
and
come from
I'm
something
guessing
trying to
you've
explain
done
to high school
something like
students why
this,
people write essays.
is, you know,
And I
sit
just want
down
to show
and
you
have the
how
conversation
wrong
and
this
just
is, how dangerous
do it
this is,
coming
and how much
full
some of it is
open-heartedly
actually
from a place
you've
of
adopted
love,
without knowing you've
and
adopted.
just say, you know,
By
look,
definition,
I'm
an
not
essay is a
looking for
structured,
you to,
creative, written
like,
composition
flip a
dealing with
switch
a
unless
specific
you
subject from a
decide
more or
to,
less personal point of
but
view.
you just
That's wrong.
need
You
to be
notice it
clear
says
that
nothing
this
about
is
readers and it
my
says nothing about
preference.
value.
This is
By definition,
what I want, and
anything
at
you
the same
write
time,
has the
I
function
fully am in
of helping
a
your
place
readers
of
understand
love for
better something
you,
they
and
want to
I
understand
feel,
well.
and assuming it's true,
That's
and
what
I
it is.
feel from you, I know
Because
that
that's what
love
it
is
does.
is
I'm
present,
Wittgensteinian on this point.
but
What something
that's,
means is what it does.
you know,
Here's
how
what your
how
writing
can we
does.
work on this in a
It
way that
helps a
works for
particular
both
set
of
of
us?
readers understand
So,
better something they want to
I'd like
understand
to,
well.
talk a
I
little
like
bit
that.
That's what its
in
job
time
is.
and space.
All this
Think
other
of
stuff, being
ourselves
structured,
as
being creative, being
we're
written,
individuated
dealing with subjects,
aspects
is
of
how you
consciousness.
fulfill the
So
function.
we've got a game token, the body,
And
and
sometimes
we're
you do it this way and
assigned
sometimes you don't.
roles
But
to play.
what is immediately
And
lost is that sense of
our
function.
task
People write
as
essays because it gives
actors
them an opportunity
is
to
to
analyze
play our
ideas,
part
situations, and
as
people and to
best we
preserve them
can.
indefinitely. Can you see how
And
this
even
is
though
all about the writer?
we've got the outline of the
It's why
play,
people write
so to
essays,
speak,
so
and
that
we
they
know
can
the
think.
role, we're a
Okay,
father,
I got
we're
no
a
problem with
parent,
somebody
we're
writing an
a
essay
lover,
because
we're,
they want to think.
you know, a
What I have a
student,
problem with
we're
is they come to my
a
office and
worker,
say my
whatever
readers don't
the
appreciate
role
me.
is that we're playing in that thing.
Well, why did you write it? I wrote it so I could
as
think.
individual
They
actors
don't owe you their
still
appreciation.
get to play that role,
They're
and
not
even
going to
though we've been
appreciate it.
given some direction and
Wrote it.
assignment as a role, we get to
This is
decide whether or not
Very
we
different.
want
And
to play
many,
that
you could make the case,
in
you could make a very important case.
following our
Homie about it,
ego,
and I
or
argue about
I'll
it when you
just say
not argue. I just homie, you're right.
playing the role in a loving
really
way
moral
or in a
problems.
fearful way. And
I want to be
we
clear
have
about
to
that.
realize that we're actors
Preserve them
as
indefinitely.
opposed
Very,
to
very dangerous
being
idea.
directors. So each person
And
is
you
to
see how
play
that's
their
this model?
role as they see
This notion
fit.
that you're writing preserves your
And what
ideas
the ego
indefinitely.
wants to do
No, it does
is
not.
to
A student of mine who's now the
usurp
chair of a philosophy
the
department
role of
had a lot of
the
trouble getting his first book out.
director and become the
He wrote
director
this book
of the
and
other
he was working
person
on it, kept working
and
on it,
start
working on
telling
it,
the other
and he sent it
person
to me.
how
He was
they're
actually a student of
supposed
mine
to
in his first year
play
here,
their
and he used to
role
write me 2-page
as
papers, and I would give him
opposed to
6
you
pages
just
of
playing
comments.
your role as
So now he
the
sends me a 400-page book,
actor,
and he
and if
says,
you
"Oh,
want
this is
to
cool, Larry. I'm going to get
perform in a
800 pages of
loving way,
comments."
you perform in a loving way
I sent him 2
and
words.
fill that role,
I said, "You're
and
done."
you don't get involved with
And he came
trying
back to
to
me and said, "No, I'm not
direct
done. I could make it better."
the other
I said, "You're done."
people in their
He said, "But
roles
Larry, this is
because that's a
ridiculous. Look at, I
usurping
look at myself
of
and I see I can make
your
it better."
role.
I
Now,
said,
you
"Jonathan,
can,
you're done."
if you've ever
He
performed
said,
in a
but
play
somebody's
or
going to read
anything
this
like
in
that,
500 years, and I
you
don't want to
can
find mistakes.
play it a certain way, otherwise
Jonathan, nobody's going to read it in
respond
500
in a
years.
loving or a fearful
The
way.
function of
And
your
that
writing is to
other
move this
person, the other
conversation
actors,
forward.
will
You cannot do that if
respond
it's in your
in
desk
a
drawer.
way that they feel
Your function is to
appropriate for
move
the
a
play
conversation
itself.
forward.
But
It's not
you
to
don't
preserve indefinitely.
necessarily
Because guess what?
say that
You could
they
be some of the
have
stuff,
to,
count on it, you're going to be some of the
play
stuff at some point that gets
their
left behind.
role the way you
This is
want
not a bad
them,
thing.
because that's not your role.
If you
That's the,
think it's going
I'll
to
say, the
be
big
preserved
picture,
indefinitely,
the director,
you're just
the
wrong.
whole script,
Really not.
which really
And he looked at me
ultimately
and he
is
says, "But
God or
Aristotle,"
God's
I
plan,
said,
the
"Come on,
Holy
Jonathan."
Spirit, and everybody's getting their own lessons.
Not
that
only
they
does it
need.
ensure permanence
So,
of ideas for the
ego wants
permanence of
to
ideas. No, it
direct
doesn't.
the play
It also ensures a degree of
as
permanence for the
opposed to
writer. No,
realize
it
that
doesn't.
we're an actor,
If you have that in
and
your
our
head, of
job
course
is
you
to play
cannot
the
write.
best role.
Right. That's a
And to
standard none
act
of us
that way
can
as we
need,
see
except like
fit.
Aristotle.
And the question is,
Right?
are we going to
Don't
respond in a
let yourself go
loving
there.
way or in a fearful
It is a way
way?
for the writer to
And
understand more
we can
clearly
minimize
ideas and
our fear.
concepts.
But
Horizontal
the ego
axis,
wants to
horizontal
direct
axis,
the other
horizontal
people and say,
axis.
"No, you're doing it wrong. This is the way
It's a
you're
way for the writer to
do.
participate in the world by
Let
sharing
them be
his
their own
feelings?
actors and just love them and honor their.
Is it a way for you? Is your
participation,
writing a
and
way
you
for you to
play your
participate in the
role
world?
The way
Yes,
you want,
but
in
not
a
by
loving
sharing
or
your
a fearful
feelings or
way,
your
but,
thoughts,
know
but by
that
changing
that's
other
your job
people's
as the
thoughts.
actor.
That's how you participate.
And it's the Holy
It's a way
Spirit.
for the writer to
It's
sharpen
the
thinking
Holy
and
Spirit's
organizational
curriculum.
skills.
It's
Can you see how skewed
You know,
this
the
is
path you're on is the
for
path you're
students?
supposed to be on.
There's a way for
That
the
was
writer to
awesome,
enjoy the
Tom. Thank you
personal
so
thrill and
much. Wow.
satisfaction
Yeah, and I can see how
of
responding
communicating his own
to
personal
an issue
ideas
in a
and
relationship
feelings. I will
from a
say it
space
again,
of
your
fear.
writing is not communicating
And I think
anything
that's
about
where
you.
I'm
That's not
at.
its
I've
job.
become
Its job is to
fearful
change
that
the
it's
way
not
your
going to
readers
happen.
think.
And if it doesn't happen, then
Now
what?
people look at me
And
and
the
say,
ego
well, that
starts
must
going
mean you're
down this
lying.
dark
Oh,
road, that
it's not like there's
rabbit
only two
hole,
options
which
in the
I
world,
don't need to do.
right? Communicating your inner thoughts or lying.
And I'm definitely in
It's
that
not.
space
You
of
don't understand the
loving him
function.
for who he is. That's how we got back
Sometimes
together,
the
actually,
function
because
of something I say is
I
to
had
communicate my
just
inner
from taking this
beliefs.
course
If
and
I'm
all
on
my spiritual
trial, and
studies, I
somebody
was
says,
just
I
able to
literally had an
drop
FBI
everything
agent
and
in my
just
office
really
this morning. That's kind of
see him
freaky,
for
but
who
it's
he is
actually the truth.
and love him.
So sometimes I
And
sort of have this, okay, I need
so
to
that
know
was
about the inner
wonderful.
part of
Yeah,
you.
thank you for that.
Sometimes I'm sitting
He
with
is
a
the
friend
spirit on the mountains.
who's just
And in
gotten
fact,
some
I
really
had
bad health news.
Grandpa Luis,
And my language is not about me.
great grandfather of
It's
my
about
daughter.
her.
He's
The
102
idea that
years
language
old.
has only one
And he
function
gave me
seems
his
to me
last
impoverished
nugget of
beyond measure.
wisdom during this
You have to think,
weekend.
I urge you to think
I
of
shared
language
with Lee
as
in
having
that
many
moment because
different
it was
functions.
so beautiful and I
The
had
function
to
of an
just
academic
write
piece
it down.
is not to
And he
communicate
told me,
your
like,
ideas,
I'm not
it's
talking
to
to
change the
you as
ideas
the
of an existing community.
102-year-old man.
No,
I'm
sometimes you
talking
do
to
that
you
by
as a man
communicating your
who
ideas.
was so
Sometimes
lucky
you
and
don't.
blessed in life that
But
could have
understand what
70
it's
years
for.
of love with a
And
woman.
understand that
He
your
was
training
married for
has
70
been
years,
all about revealing your head.
with his wife.
You've been trained, it's in
He
your
said
blood.
she was the
That's
most
how you're supposed to
intelligent
do
and
when you write.
composed woman.
And that's just not the case.
Even when I wasn't the best man
So,
and I made a lot of mistakes,
go to the bottom
she
one.
always loved
Welcome
me.
to the world, the new
Don't ever
world.
feel superior to
We may
this
thus
man. He's
expect a
talking
thorough
about Lee because he
exteriorization
wants
of
me
knowledge with
to
respect to the
have this
knower,
relationship
at whatever point he or
as
she
my
may
holy
occupy in the
relationship.
knowledge
He's
process.
not a cosmic
The old
student,
principle
in fact, but
that
he's
the
a very
acquisition of
wise man,
knowledge
and
is
I love him and
indissociable
he
from the
loves me.
training of minds
So
or even of
he
individuals
said-
becoming
He
obsolete.
said, don't ever feel
And
superior
will it
to
become
this
ever
man,
more so?
even
The
if you know
relationship.
better.
Here's what he's talking
You are
about.
not superior.
When I was in
Don't try
school
to
and somebody
educate
said,
him.
oh,
He said
she's
this
amazing.
strong.
This professor, she's
I
Professor
know how
so-and-so.
clever
She's
you are,
amazing.
and I love you. If you
What we
love
talked
him,
about?
and I
We
know
talked about
he
how
will
much she
treat
had in
you
her head.
as you truly deserve, he said.
We said she
Don't
knows
use
more
your knowledge
about
as
this
a way to feel better
She's
than
forgotten
him,
more
because that kills the love.
than I will ever learn.
Don't say no to him, even if
And what
you, even
Leotard
if
is
you
saying
know
here
he's wrong.
is that
Say yes and
knowledge
listen
no
to
longer
him more
has anything
than
to
trying
do
to change
with the
him
inside
in
of
the
individual
instant.
heads.
Because he will be
Now,
with
you
you
talk
no
about
matter
somebody
what
being a
if
great
you don't
professor.
try to
What are you
change
talking
him
about?
and love him
You're
despite
talking
his
about
mistakes.
what they have,
Then he
or
said,
she
don't ever
has
go to bed
done
without saying how
in
much you love
this
him, or
exterior
saying sorry
space
if you
between
know
heads.
you messed up. Or even if
Now
he
it's not
is
how
the
smart
one
they
who
are,
made
how
the
much they
mistake,
know.
don't ever go to
It's
sleep
what they've
without
done in
saying
the space
sorry and I love
between
you.
heads.
He also
What they've
said Americans are very
exteriorized,
good people,
what they've done
but
out
they are
there.
a different culture.
That's your job.
So
It's not to reveal the
but they are
interior of your
different
head.
cultures, so you
It's
need
to
to
change
adapt
what's going on in
quickly.
the spaces between
Don't think
heads.
ever that you're better, not
Or
less
however much you
either.
want to talk about
So be willing
the
to adapt
construction of
always,
knowledge.
and you surely will have the love of
This
that
is very
you
unpleasant to
deserve.
lots of people.
I know he will give you that
The relationship
kind of love. That's all I wanted
between
to
the
say.
suppliers and users of knowledge to the knowledge they
And
supply
then
and
he said
use.
that these are probably
That
my
is
last
your
words
relationship to your own
you, as I
knowledge.
know
Is
I'm
now
not
tending
going
and
to
will
be
increasingly
around for so
tend
long.
to assume the form
So
already
put him
taken by the
always
relationship
first,
of
no matter
commodity
what.
producers
Trust me, your daddy
and
is of
consumers to
love,
the
and we all
commodities they
be with
produce and
her,
consume.
you will
That is
on your
the
way.
form of value.
Put him first always.
Your
and he will
relationship to your
always
own
support you,
knowledge is the
but
same as
you
the
know what, when
relationship
he
of a
said
farmer
those words, like,
to the
put him
wheat
first,
or a miner
for us
to the
as
coal.
women, those
relationship
words are really like
is the form of
kicking the
value.
ego, right? Because
And I bet
we
for
have
many of you,
always,
that doesn't feel very good.
being in some form like
People don't like that.
felt
get that they don't
abused
like it.
in some form
But I
by
can tell
men.
you,
So whenever you
that's the
hear
way it
those
is.
words, it always the ego comes like,
All right.
no,
Now,
that's
let's get
not,
out of the
that's
stratosphere and get down to
102-year-old
some nuts and bolts.
kind of belief system.
The next few
But
pages
I didn't
just
took it like
summarize
that,
what I've
because
been
now
talking
I know
about.
better. Now I know that he is coming
Go to
from
page
the
8.
heart. And what he he is saying by that, it's almost like saying, put yourself first.
So now,
if I put
I want to go back to the difference between because, if, and unless, and
moving my life
and talk about words like but, although, however, inconsistent, and anomaly.
So whenever he said to me that I need to put leave first,
these words are all serving the same function in this text.
Just to be
These are transition words, as he rightly said, or flow words. These are not.
Because my daughter,
anomaly is a noun, inconsistent is an adjective.
Daughter, but she will
but can you see what all these have in
She
common?
will move away from me in some point.
Anomaly, inconsistent, but, however,
everything that
although.
he was saying to me in the past.
These
is
are
like
flow words,
you need to put
but these are
yourself
not.
first.
So what does this list
and
have in
have your
common?
life full of love first in order for you to have a great
However,
life.
but
and
although
your daughter
inconsistent,
will always
anomaly.
be with you because she is your
create
daughter.
tension.
I mean, you're not going to lose
Good
your
word
daughter,
for it.
but you can't
Tension.
be without the love of your life.
Give me some other words.
You can let
Challenge.
the love of your life go.
Good.
If you move around
Contradiction.
your life, because he was, I mean, this guy. He was the one who told me in December, you need to
We use the word for
divorce
all
my
of this.
grandson.
Instability. We use two words. First of all, we use
And it's
instability.
funny. So
There's
don't
not
take
magic.
his,
I don't have. I
his
have no
words
trouble at
wrong
all
when
if
he
you want to
says
use the
that.
words like
Put him
tension.
first, because it's
can
not
read my
coming
own
from the
handwriting.
ego. Those words are coming from the light, and it's
Challenge,
all about me
contradiction,
having
red
the
flag.
priority
We
on
find the word
love
instability to be
instead
helpful.
of the fear.
Because
I
here's what
have
we think
that last nugget of wisdom
is
from
one
Grandpa
general
Luis.
way
I
to
don't
talk
know
about it. It's not
if when I
magic.
come back he will
It's
be
just
there,
helpful.
but I'm already
And that is,
I'm already considering him a
a
miracle
lot of people
with legs,
come
as
out
I
of
always
school
call him.
with
So
a
I
model
know
for
if
writing at
he-
the beginning of a
If
text.
he dies
It's basically in the
before I
mode
go
of
back to
explanation.
Media in May,
That is,
I'm so grateful
they
for
think
him
that what
I
you
will
should do
never
is give
feel a
background
part of him.
or something
I
like
have his words
definitions,
of wisdom
and then
really
move
deep
to
down
something like a
my
thesis.
heart and my mind. And
Notice this is all very much
and he
on the
has showed-
positivistic
he has
model.
always showed me
That
the
is,
reflection of my
learned
father.
knowledge
I mean,
starts
he
by a
has been my
solid
father
foundation. You have a
in this
solid
world in
foundation
these
of
last
previous
few
knowledge. You have a
years.
solid
So I'm
foundation
really
of a
thankful for that,
definition.
and I
You have a
wanted to say
solid
that because it
foundation
comes
of,
along with
here's
the
the worst
Tom,
one of all, generalizations.
that I'm sharing right now.
Thank you, Grandpa Luis.
Right? So many people have been taught this model.
He's
They don't even know
the
they're
sweetest
using
guy.
it. You open with a generalization, you move to a specific thesis,
I
then you
wonder
talk
if I
about
can
the
share a
thesis, then you move
thought
out to
too
a
that
generalization. At the end, we
that's
call it the
coming up for
martini
me,
glass
or a memory.
model of writing.
And this
Wow,
is
you don't want
about
to do this. You really don't want to do this.
when I was trying to force, and I'm going
Instead,
to say force. That doesn't mean other people are trying to force, but my agenda
you open
onto
with,
someone
when I
else.
show you on
that,
page 8 is
or
a
when they
problem.
were trying to force it onto me, it didn't feel natural for me. It
Whose
felt like I
problem?
had to do something, and when I felt that again, I felt
Got it.
scared that what if
A
I let them
specific
down? I
set
may not be
of
able to do it. It
readers.
doesn't come natural for me.
Not,
And
which
then
is what you're doing right now, very
when I
likely.
stopped,
Your
the strange thing happened that it was usually
I see all
someone else
kinds of
that
texts
needed
that have the
the
language of,
I
dear
feel like
reader,
it was usually someone else
I
that
have this
needed the
problem
physical
that really interests
affection
me.
and attention from me because
Sometimes you have this sense of,
whatever.
ever
Who
since
knows?
I
Yeah,
was young,
I know it's something. It's
I've been
something about it,
fascinated
but we don't
by
care.
fill in the blank.
It's just I'm just saying.
And
that's
now
actually probably
I've spent,
more.
I want you to fund me for a
in reality
year
for me anyway, my
of
experience.
solving my
And
problem, of not
I
knowing
noticed
enough
that if I
about
felt
blank.
forced, oh my goodness, I was like,
Right?
get me away, need to get away.
Wrong
I mean, I honestly
problem.
couldn't even continue the relationship because
Wrong
it
location
felt
of the
smothering.
problem.
And then
Problem
when I
needs to be
didn't, when I haven't
located
felt
not
forced,
in
I
necessarily
think
in the
about all
readers,
the times
but in
that I
something
haven't felt
the
forced when I
readers
was with
care about.
my
For
husband.
academics, it's something the readers want
was
to understand.
affectionate.
If they're not
It was
academics,
like
it's something the readers, a problem that the readers
if I didn't
want
feel
to
forced,
fix.
it did seem to come more natural.
So, for example, I know nobody's
I'm
here
only
in education,
saying
but if you
that
want to
it
get
wasn't a
funding in the grant for
manipulation.
studying
It
something
was
on
just
education,
something I'm
you
noticing
start with a
now that
problem
we're
in the
speaking
world.
about it.
We got an education system that's clearly broken. That's a problem. That's a problem your readers care about. Probably not the readers' problem. They actually probably have pretty good educations. They probably are sending their kids to pretty good schools, but they care about that problem. All right?
Really appreciate you guys being here with me
problems
today.
in specific
Just gonna
reading
let you all know I'll be
communities.
here tomorrow reading lesson
This is
89.
very different from general
Getting
background.
to the end of the review
definition.
lessons. We'll have new stuff soon.
Then you move to a
But
solution.
thank you all for joining me. Blessings on the day.
And of course, notice your thesis can be in a solution only if the readers perceive the problem.
Yeah, I think that parental
Sometimes
thing is
I'll say to
interesting
people,
too because
this
I have a
thesis, is it a
history
solution
of,
to a problem? They say, yeah, of course it is. Okay, so where did you
I
say
think
what the
my
problem?
mother thinks she's
It's not there.
affectionate, but I don't perceive that she's
Not
that
there.
affectionate, to be honest.
Gotta be there. Not gotta be there. 9 times out
She
of 10,
told me
99
she
times
was
out of 100, it's gotta
affectionate
be
with
there.
me when I was a
But the
baby.
readers can see it's
So
a
when I
solution to
trace
that
back,
problem.
I'm thinking, well, maybe that's where it's coming from.
Now, in very general terms, and I'm just going to
maybe I
sketch
wanted
this out
more of
quickly,
that
we find that problems have two
from
chief
my mom,
characteristics.
maybe.
One is
But I have to
the
really write
situation
and
has to
think
be
about it.
unstable.
But I love
That is, you have to generate a sense of
Adriana,
instability.
those couples who
Words like but,
stay together
however,
like that. It always seems to
inconsistent,
be that
although,
generation though,
anomaly
where,
show the situation to be inconsistent, unstable.
people are able to just now people
And
get
you see the
divorced in a
crucial
drop of a hat.
difference
Not
in why
saying
so
you
many
or I
writers
did,
are so
but
bad at this?
they just seem to be able to weather the storm
look at
in
this
these
model.
relationships, and they had ups
This
and
model
downs.
is a
And
model
like he
of
was saying about your
stability
grandmother,
and
how she
continuity.
was, and
This model
as a
is a
woman,
model
like
that
finding
says
that place.
this
I have a
thesis
cousin who's,
validity,
oh my
its
gosh,
validity
she's
is
been the rock
established
for
by
her
it being
husband.
continuous
And
with something
in
that
our
we
eyes,
already
looking
know
from
to
the
be valid.
outside, it's like he's
So the
done some
language
crap.
that
Like
people
he's done
use is
so
a
many
language of
things.
continuity and
And
consistency.
she's just like this
The horrible irony
mountain,
is your readers
and
are actually
so
searching
solid
for
for him. And
language
they're,
of
I
instability,
guess they're in their 70s
inconsistency,
now,
and tension.
and just together
So
since
the
their
crucial
20s. And
point I want
she's
to
just
make
withstood the
is we're back
storm
to this interference
and been
pattern.
there for him. And
People
I
say,
want to.
well,
Like a lucky
look,
guy.
I just want to talk at
He
this point
is.
about
Whether he knows it or not.
about consistency. I want to
Yeah.
show the
I
continuity
just want
between
to
what I'm saying
keep
and what
going
comes
to that
before.
fountain of
That's
love
what I
and
want to
finding
do
that
at this
place,
part of my text.
of having that
What happens if
unconditional
the
love,
readers
where
are looking at
she
that
clearly
moment of your
has for him.
text for a
Not saying that
problem?
you should stay in something that's not
What if
good
they're
for you,
looking
but
to decide whether it's
I
valuable by
admire
whether or
that,
not they have
and
a
it's so
problem?
beautiful what your
It's not
grandpa
neutral. They're looking for something that shows them inconsistency. You are giving them language of continuity. You are interfering
Oh,
with
whose
their
grandfather?
reading process.
My
They're
ex-husband.
slowing down. They're
Ah,
getting confused.
okay.
They're getting aggravated, and they can stop two
That's
paragraphs
how
into your
special
text.
he is.
2 paragraphs. They're done.
Well, if anybody wants to share
Because
something
what they're looking
down,
for is value,
this,
and you're using
the
language
audience,
that's not
please
neutral.
raise
It
your
is
hand.
contradicting
We
and
have been
interfering with
sharing
their sense of
a lot
identifying
of things today,
value.
but we would love to hear somebody else's
Okay.
voices or
There's a second point.
experiences or thoughts.
Which a lot of academics really dislike,
Or go
some
about your
don't mind
day
it at
like
all,
today. Whatever. It's all good.
which we call the language of costs and benefits. And we differentiate that for a reason. What we mean is, not always, but very often, you need to use code language to your readers to show them that
Hey,
the
Michael, how have you
instability
been?
imposes a cost on
Hello, all.
them.
Been listening
on
in.
you.
Been okay.
On them.
Wanted to
Or
find out, did Bob
conversely,
make it from Ghana
that
to
the
Liberia?
instability, if it's solved,
He did. He
offers
sure
a benefit
did.
to them.
And I don't know exactly where he's at.
The language
but
is different.
I have all
There's a
the
language
faith
of
in the world
cost
that
and a
God's
language of
going with him
benefit.
and that he's going to
There's a
produce
version
some
of saying,
miracles.
dear readers, dear
Good.
important readers, you were brilliant, you've
Yeah, I wanted
advanced
to
us
resonate
enormously,
with
we're
some
so
of the share
grateful.
that
But
Janine
there's
was
this little
saying. I
inconsistency in
resonated
your
with
work.
some of what she said.
Now, they want to know, well, does that
And for me, it's a
inconsistency
constant
cost us anything? Because
understanding
guess what? You
that
know what about my work?
any
It's got
like
tons of
lack
inconsistency.
consciousness is
Much
coming
of it
from
doesn't
within
make
and from
any
within the training,
Is the inconsistency
from
you're
within our
pointing
personality
out
training.
costing us anything?
And
Or
so,
you
like,
can say to them, hey, there's inconsistency in your work.
being
If
able to
you
reset,
improve it, you get this benefit from it.
in the face of
Those
adversity,
are
or in
different
the
coded
face
languages.
of, a
I
challenging
urge you to
time.
pay attention to the actual journals that you're imagining publishing
So that's
in
what I'm
and
currently
see whether or
working
not
with.
there's a pattern
And
of language of benefit and language of cost.
I'm finding the
There may
course
not be a
helpful
pattern. You may see both.
to be able to see
But if
that.
there's a pattern, you know what my
Be able
advice
to
is going to
see
be.
the light in everyone
Use
before
it.
whatever
Follow it.
darkness is being expressed or being seen.
Rhetorics, the published articles will show you the
The light
language that
behind the
works.
clouds, if you will, or
Right there in front of
the
you.
light
If you just look
that,
at
that
it.
exists in everybody.
So, skip past page 9,
That's clear.
page
That's
10.
sort of
This is
where
just
I'm
some
working with today.
just some explanations of some bad habits. Oh, yes, please.
Thanks, Michael. I think I feel you.
Oh, the literature review. Yeah. Okay. Sure.
All right, everybody. I'm to a point
Right.
where I'm going to move on with my day.
Okay. No, I'm happy to talk.
We'll wrap the room up at 8:30.
Talking about the lit review.
7 minutes. But let you guys do. And
Let's
talk
start by
about whatever
doing
you want.
this.
I really appreciate you being here. It really
Specifically
adds some
talk about a
practice and has helped make
literature
this year
review. I just did a
spectacular.
terrible thing
Thank
to
you so
whoever
much for coming and spending
poor
some
people
time
who
with
are
us.
actually going to watch
In
this.
this
All right. Let's talk about that.
Namaste.
First of all, writing a lit
Yeah, I
review
just
as a
wanted to say
PhD
one
student is
thing.
one of the
Why
hardest
is it
things
so
there is to
easy
do.
to see
It's
someone
incredibly
else
hard.
see
Because
the
you don't know who
asshole
your
in
readers
someone
are.
else when it's our
Let's
ours?
talk about a straight
Have you ever
teacher
looked around and tried to
reading
look at your own
a lit
asshole?
review.
It ain't easy.
What is the function of a
That's a
lit
great
review
point.
There are mirrors.
for the teacher
We need to see those
who
mirrors.
is not reading it
And
to
I swear I
change
know
her
how it's
view
easy
about
to
the
see it in
world,
everybody else.
but is reading it
But it is
to judge you?
It is
What's the function
most
of a lit
wonderful
review
blessing our
for that
enemies can
reader?
give us is the chance to release ourselves
To show
from
that you
the
understood
thing
it,
that's
right?
destroyed.
That's perfectly clear. Is
Not
that
really
its
our enemy,
function
but
in a
I like how
professional text?
you ever tried to look at her.
Is that its function in a professional text? You think they're reading this to find out whether you know the stuff about anything? What's its function in a professional text? It has several. What's one?
Really?
What's the function of a lit review in a professional text?
Take that image with you today. The light in you is all that I would see.
Ego massaging?
Not your
That's a real
rear
function.
end.
I got no problem with that. People think, no, it's a real function. Ego massaging is a function.
Have a wonderful, blessed day.
That's good.
Credibility is a function. Forgive me
I'm so
for that.
glad
Credibility
you
is a
two are together,
function.
By the way, I'm so happy for you. Oh man.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
Yeah, but I
truly
hate the
a miracle
language
and a
moving
blessing.
forward.
I can imagine. Yeah, I can imagine that. Oh.
There you go. You know how to, no, you see the difference? You see the difference? Here's what professional good lit reviews, and I didn't include them in this handout, but just send me an email, I'll send you some. Really good professional lit reviews
beginning with the English.
will use the lit review to enrich the problem.
Even better probably in a few weeks with my English.
Instead of saying,
I know
here's
you
what a
do it
student lit
beautifully,
review says.
Adriana, no doubt at
In
all.
1998, he said
adventure,
this.
right? Anyway,
In 2000, he said this. In 2002, he said this. In 2005, he said, sorry for the he's, but I'm looking at a bunch of he's, right? The professional lit review says what?
It's so stimulating to feel alive.
He said
right
this.
Now, and whenever we can feel alive, and it's coming from that adventurous
2004,
place. And
he
the learning
said something
comes.
which, if we're
Don't try to learn; it'll
we
just
realize
happen.
Yeah, I know.
what's intention.
Thank you, my friend, and thank you everybody for all those.
And then in 2005, he
Happiness
said
that you show
this,
us.
which
This is
complicates the
that we are
situation here, but
experiencing
even more
together.
complicates it if we put that
We
in
are
motion with
really,
what he
really,
said
really
back in
happy
2001.
because we feel blessed, even
Now we
when
have
our future is
layers
uncertain.
of complexity, complication,
What's really
intention.
interesting,
Now, can we say
Adriana
I'm
and
moving
Lee,
forward?
what's really interesting
Yeah,
is I
but you
don't have
notice
a
I'm not
relationship
moving
right
forward
now,
from
but
stability.
I feel in love
now
with
enhanced
I
their
feel like
sense
I'm the
of
love of you two.
instability.
I don't know why.
You
I mean,
are?
And if you're really good,
yeah,
you
we
hike the
actually,
cost.
yeah, it's really did. Like I'm so
start saying,
happy
wow,
in love.
Not only is
No.
there a little tension there,
I really
but
am.
it's a tension
I know it sounds
that
weird,
matters
maybe
as this
hard to
community
understand for
as
some
we go
people,
forward.
but like maybe it's
it
because I have no,
suggests
well,
that
there's no ego
not only
there
were
in the
they
way.
wrong,
I'm not
but
jealous.
we're
I feel
wrong
like
as we move
optimistic
forward
and
based on their
enthusiastic, and I'm on this
ideas.
journey with it's a vicarious
them,
type of living,
and the rest
which
of
is
us.
actually I never thought about
Are
the
we
word
moving
vicarious,
forward?
but
Yes,
I love
but from
living
instability,
vicariously.
not from stability.
Apparently,
That's a big difference.
it feels so good.
So, for
You're
example,
welcome. I wish I could package this up. We could make millions, for
let's
sure.
take a couple
It's,
of examples
It's something beyond anything
of
I've
this,
ever
because
had,
perfectly
that's for sure. I'm incredibly blessed.
we can use these
And I can
examples to
feel
talk
you
further
to your
more about lit reviews.
excitement.
Page 12.
For getting off this call and getting together. I feel it.
We got
Here's an instance from Bill Sewell, who was
this week.
just a terrific writer.
My job is supposed to end this
Ever
week.
since
I'm
Herodotus,
transitioning off of that.
historians have
There's
written
just
about events.
ton going
Battles,
on.
alliances, scandals,
I have
conquests,
to-
conspiracies,
I have to
revolts,
tell you
royal
something that
successions,
happened a few
reforms,
weeks ago.
elections,
He was
religious
really
revivals, assassinations,
feeling not
discoveries.
in the
Momentous events have
the
always
right
been the
mind,
bread and
and he
butter
was
of narrative
telling me,
history.
"This is your
Now,
last
if you talk to
opportunity,
some high
Adriana,
school
for you
teachers
to
and you'll say to them,
go with
what
your
is he
life,
doing
let him
there?
hear," and
They will say to you,
he was feeling like
oh, he's giving
and,
background.
he was feeling low
No,
that day.
he's really
and I
not.
looked at him and it was like,
When do we
really,
find out that he's
how
not
can
giving
I
background?
not think that this is coming from
The next
Daddy?
word is
anything that you can fail
but.
on the level of the form, you're failing it.
He's
and
not
I'm
giving
still
background.
loving
He's
you.
building a
I mean,
problem.
you don't have a place. You are in between
And the
jobs.
differences are
You-
enormous.
Your kids
So many
are
faculty
in this
members will say to
complicated
students, you know what, this
situation with
paper
your
really isn't
ex-wife.
working very well. This
You have to
introduction
pay-
doesn't work. And the student says, well, what do I need to do? And they'll say something like, well, you need to give me more
And
background
even
here.
though I
Oh my God.
really see you
When you
as the
say
love of my
background to
life,
people, they usually say,
how
okay, I guess
cannot this
give
be
more
from
history of
God
the subject
if
or
I'm not
something. They
saying all
don't
your-
mean that.
Or
They
all
mean,
your
I can't figure out why
problems,
this
but only
matters.
your light. And I am
The background they
thrilled
need
to
is a problem.
have this life with you because I know
But
for sure.
despite the
because I have
prominence of
experienced
events in
it
historical
myself,
narratives, the
that
event has rarely been
God has
scrutinized as a
us
theoretical
supported
category.
in some beautiful
Now,
way, and we have
that a
never
problem?
been able to recognize that. I mean, I know that before the
Is it
Course in
coded
Miracles, I didn't
as a problem?
recognize the
It's an-
work of
it's
God in my
undoubtedly
life. Now
a
I
instability.
know,
But
so that is why I'm so short of doing
is it a problem?
this
I'm going
out
to
of
cut to
the-
something that's I want to just be
out
able
of
to put on the
love
table
that
for
I
you.
feel for Lee, because now
Later on in this handout, you're going to
I
see
can
a
see
couple
my
of pages
life.
on
I
the
mean,
difference between what we call
if we are
gap
all
and what we call
mirrors,
error.
and I can see
a lot of
Lee and
especially
feel
young
Lee, the way that
academics
I feel
very
for
worried
him.
about
That means
telling
that I'm loving myself
these
this way,
important
that I'm
people that they're
recognizing
wrong.
myself this
Instead,
way.
they use the
I
language
never
of gap.
fell in love
That is,
with
they
Lee
say,
because of
we've
his
studied this stuff for a long
physics
time, but we haven't
or
looked
his
at
looks
this.
or
There's a gap
whatever
in our
level of the
knowledge.
form. My
And the truth is
engagement
that
with him
sometimes
was
works, but way
his
more
heart
often than not, it
first,
does not
then
work.
his mind,
Why not?
and then his looks, because he's really handsome.
gap
to
in
me. I
knowledge.
don't
We have a gap in
mind
our
it
knowledge.
For everybody,
Why wouldn't that
he's
work?
not, but for me, he's very handsome. But
Well, it's really a small gap, that's sure.
That's the whole difference in a relationship or beginning of the relationship.
Well,
I never had that kind of.
But perhaps you're the first one who's been able to
beginning
fill
with
it.
anybody. I always
Still isn't gonna
began
work. Often doesn't work.
in some form from the level of the form. I'm sorry
Here's
for
what
repeating
gap
that word, but
assumes.
this is
Another model
completely
of
different,
knowledge
and I
that
can
is
only
now
see his
This is
his
supposed to look like a
strength,
crossword
his
puzzle.
courage. I can see his
Can you imagine if
willingness
this is a crossword
to
puzzle?
be the best father that
Here's
he
what the
can be.
gap
I can
model
only see
assumes. It
how
assumes that
good
knowledge
he
is
is at
bounded.
his work, how good he
Assumes
is
that knowledge is like a crossword
with
puzzle
things
with a fixed
around
number of
him.
pieces.
I can only see that because the
And you
other
say,
things are
"Ooh,
just
ooh,
the shadows of
I filled in this
himself or
piece."
myself, not
This only makes sense
or
in a
persistent
bounded
that we are
model of
not
knowledge.
part of the light. And now
Go back to
I'm
this
seeing
model.
the light in myself, and that is why I can see
What if
the
we
light in
think this
him,
is
even
wrong,
though we
and that
are in
knowledge
these
infinite?
circumstances that are not
It's just gonna
fixed
keep on being
problems. They are
infinite.
just momentary
Now what happens
circumstances
again?
that will be
Think of it this way.
be
If
changed.
knowledge is infinite
in
and
some
you filled
form,
in a
because
gap,
that's
how many
how
gaps are left?
God works.
You have done
So-
nothing.
That is true.
Yeah, I
Because
wanted
there's
to
still
share
an
that.
infinite number of gaps left. I'm not saying gap can never work. I'm saying gap is very dangerous.
So it's 8:30.
Is Bill talking about a gap here when he says it's rarely? See the word rarely? That's usually, that's often code for gap. Oops, gap, haven't done something, gap.
Thanks, everybody.
Is this a gap?
Bye-bye.
No.
Namaste.
It's rarely been scrutinized as a theoretical category. Why is that a problem? And for whom?